Everyone has something to share, in either wisdom, story, or logic, and it's clearly amazing to hear all the differing missing links discovered by people, unique to their own journeys, and in how they have come to discover them. Together, we can help to build a bigger picture for a better future, for a brighter tomorrow. Let's stand united. Let's remove the veils, and let's create a new world together. Are you that missing link? Join Jesse Hale on the Missing Link Talk Show as he helps to unveil the mystery through the unique wisdom and story of others.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome everybody here back to the Missing Link. Today we're excited to talk to a concert production manager, audio engineer, philosopher, performer, and truth teller. Welcome to the Missing Link, Aaron M. Sound. How are you doing today, brother?
Good. How you feeling, Jesse? I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me on. Here, let me switch my view over to somewhere I'm looking at you directly. There we go. What's going on, man? How's things going?
Things are going good, and I should also say a visual extraordinaire with all your technical graphics you got going on.
Thank you.
So why don't you
I've just
start
added
off
a couple of fun things, man.
Yeah, lots of thoughts. I don't know if there's a little bit of a delay, but yeah. Why don't you start off with telling us about yourself?
I apologize.
No worries. Tell us about yourself, about your journey, a little bit about your background, your education, what part of the world you grew up in, what part of the world you're in now, if you like disclosing that information, anything about yourself and your journey, what got kind of waken aware, what got you YouTubing, anything about your journey that you wanted to share with our audience here today, especially if they may be hearing you here for the first time.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of the story. I'm a Cali boy. I'm a actual Valley kid, grew up in the San Fernando Valley. My dad was a radio engineer and a electronics engineer, QC analyst, and engineer for quality assurance later on in his life. He's still with us, but he's retired now. My mom also was in electronics. She was a draftswoman in the 70s and 80s. And I say this because it's important because I grew up around electronics. My dad having a lot of tape hanging around. My grandmother was an opera singer. My grandfather was a theologian educator. And I was surrounded by a lot of educated people growing up, and intellectuals and scientists and artists. And I was taught how to sing from an early age. I was very blessed to just be around a lot of wildly interesting people, I would say it, and have a lot of good mentors around it. And I was a child actor, a working child actor, SAG-AFTRA from the time I was 8, and I worked all the way until I was about 17. That's a whole story unto itself, and my experience of that arc and curve of being, here in LA, growing up around a lot of other very talented people as well. Most of the people that I grew up with in that scenario as well, who I went to school with or was in drama camp with, they ended up becoming actors or producers or directors of a lot of big famous stuff. I actually got turned off to acting and such. That's more as I became an adult. I spent a lot of time being enthralled with history, with religion, trying to understand first and foremost, something that's important to note, and I always forget to mention this, is that my grandfather, being an educator, and fancying himself a philosopher and a theologian, pushed me to believe what I wanted to believe and find out what was best for me, but to follow a practice of what we had all practiced just in case. Because the joke is we never know, but might as well cover your bases, literally, And this is a man who, by the way, was an Orthodox Jew until he was in his 40s. Then he reformed. And the joke around my family was also always ickle bickle, you're a pickle, it makes it kosher. Granddaddy likes bacon, so you know what I mean? So like I came from a very kind of I guess I hate to term it liberal, but a creative and eccentric background as far as my family's concerned. My grandmother's father was a Creole antiques dealer. And because of him, we actually had some amazing pieces hanging around where still to this day we have some of these pieces. But in particular, when my grandparents passed away, we found out that there was a table that my great grandfather had found that and restored. That was one of 3 Louis XIV chess tables that was then sold at Sotheby's auction. You know, I mean, like very interesting people, man. I grew up around, and I still have my grandfather's library. I've added to it since. Either way, I'm very lucky to be around a lot of folks who showed that joy can come from educating oneself in a whole bunch of different schools, a whole bunch of different ways that we can enjoy life and perform. And by the way, performing was just another thing of that, where I was always told that good men do work and great men find out what the world has to offer. Now, I don't know what you can take that what you will, but that was the theme. So, you know, I was surrounded by a lot of folks who did a lot of different stuff. I had a great uncle who was an incredible artist. Had another one, not directly related to me, but we would call him a great uncle, who was a biochemist, used to say some real scary shit growing up at the Satyrs, you know, like, so for real, the joke was, yes, one little egg hits the ground and we all die. Pass the potatoes, you know, I mean, these kind of terrible, these are the kind of things I grew up. So if anybody ever wonders why I'm eccentric, this has a lot to do with it. I had a very, I guess now unusual upbringing of really fun, eclectic, artistic, and also very nerdy folks, you know. And I'm proud of that. Actually, I'm proud that I can cite back several generations of where I come from and what, because that's what's installed and instilled in me all the things of my drive to start with coming up. So if you're talking about growing up, I attribute a lot of how I came up and who I came up around and what my drives were. And then I credit my parents, you know, also I'm a 70s, 80s kid. So I believe you and I are similar to same age. So, you know, we were allowed to run pretty free and, you know, show up before dark and you're fine. And so my parents really let me drive my whole life. Like my mom wasn't the one who put me in acting or dance classes or anything. That was me forcing her to let me do those things. Also chasing women at a young age. I was also in dance classes. I'm never going to lie about this. It was one of my great gags, tricks as a kid that, you know, people made fun of me before this, by the way. I will always own this. Being the one man in a class of 30 women taking dance class. Nobody gets it at first. And then after a while, they realize that I'm dating one of them. So that changes the whole field. You know, I learned that early. Say what you will of me, but you know, so there's that. My education, I'll be honest, I had really good grades and a really fast advancement through my education up until high school. And then I just failed at everything for a while there. I think I failed myself, my friends, my life, because I was so confused as to who I was becoming. I think I became disillusioned with the world. I'll even do it, even on a stranger platitude. I went through this ego death as a young man after playing the role of Jesus in JC Superstar, and it was a lot of playing that role as an actor. Which, by the way, just as a side note, I forgot to mention this. I was very lucky, and to the majority of my acting life to play leads and things of that nature. I could dance and sing and such. So, and was a working actor. So it played into all that. But when you have the ego death at that age, and for the reasons I did, and this has a lot to do with my philosophy now, by the way, is that initial ego death at a young age to come upon what most people do in like their 30s, late 20s, which is to face their own mortality, their own sense of credibility and credulity, whether life is real or not, whether all of these things, and whether your friends or your families, all of the things that make us who we are. I had a stalling moment where I was literally reading Barclay and Hegel and Schoenberg, and it. I'm not gonna lie. At the end of playing Jesus in JC Superstar, I didn't get a Christ complex. I had the opposite of that. I felt that I was the scourge of living because I couldn't contend with the amount of things I was experiencing, really, truly. It took me years to actually filter through it all and synthesize it. And nobody was really telling me that at that moment. It took a couple of years before I could even talk about it. But so that's my education there became reading everything I could out of my grandfather's library, reading everything I could from the library, because this is pre-internet, getting hold of as many informational and science magazines as I could, learning where you could find science paperwork in the library, that's, by the way, where I would say I started running into all the real conspiracy theorists of the late 80s, early 90s, the real, and kind of hanging out with a whole bunch of folks who had some alternative concepts of the world, which I'm very glad to say I got to meet a whole slew of them, at a young age, so that I could really learn about the biasing and where, like, the difference between a crackpot and an actual, genius, very thin line, and to be kind of introduced to not only alternative sciences, but the folks that were actually practicing the occult, were actually practicing witchcraft, were actually proper pagans, or I was very lucky. And being in LA, there was a lot of different people, a lot of different folks that I came across, both in the acting world and then also in rock and roll, club ownership, in the background of and this is where, like, when I turned about 17, 18, after the ego death and just general failing at life, I had to rebuild things. Graduated on my own, which I did graduate. And then I went to a lot of school, just a ton of school, as much education as I possibly could. And thank goodness at the time that credits were very cheap, thanks to state subsidies here in California, going to a community college that ended up letting me go to a big school and audit their classes. So it was a great excuse for me to just dive into educating myself. And then I went to a place called Dick Grove School of Music, where I studied audio engineering. All the while, by the way, in the background of all this, I had purchased a PA with funds that I had made off of acting, and started running that around LA between 17 and 18. I'd already been out on my own since I was 16. I was also helping my friends produce plays and doing shows that we were actually making money, off of. We're doing original shows, and I'm very proud to say that I was in a couple original shows that the guy who is one of the head writers on New Girl wrote, which is one of my friends who, has gone on to do great things. I have a couple of real close friends I've known forever that have gone on to do some real great big TV things, and a couple of our classmates from that same little group of folks who are very well known. So the point being is that that's actually less important than the fact that most of us have gone on to do what we wanted to do as far as art is concerned. I think that's the more important thing, that we all have made our livings in life, art, music, performance. And like for me, I thought I was going to be an actor. I was on that route, and then I found rock and roll, and I found audio, and I found putting on that, all the things I knew about theater and putting on a show could apply on this massive level that I knew about, by the way, but I had never really thought about doing it until I was a teen and got turned off of the acting thing. So it was just a natural thing to go there. And it also helps that I grew up going to Dead shows. My mom's cousin, which I always say is my cousin, but which is my second cousin, is the longtime publicist for the Grateful Dead. So I always had some access. Like, I got to sit behind Dan Healy, one of my great mentors in audio, and watch him, pull up a mix in the 80s on the, before the audience walked in, and sound check and, test Pink Noise through very early line array, pre-line array, Line array being the modern PA systems we use for large scale concerts. I'm very blessed. When I was a teenager, got to sit there high on psychedelics and watch the auto EQs move. So, so there's I'm really blessed to have a lot of influences and a lot of good mentors, a lot of people doing what it was, and a lot of my cohorts and friends also getting to do and really just setting forth the initiative to do what we wanted to do. So you've got this weird crossover period in my early 20s from 17 to about 24 where I'm hustling and I'm frequenting a couple occult shops here in LA because I'm starting to really learn and read about the esoteric, learning to read about Gnosticism. I'd already learned about the ulterior or the Gnostic texts and the question of whether or not the testimony of Mary is actually real or not. It was already, I mean, this is early 90s. So this is really far out stuff that we kind of know about in general now because there's videos of it, and archaeological findings and such. But at the time period, these were things where you had to go seek out knowledge, knock on people's doors. And I'm very blessed, once again, being in LA, being around a whole bunch of different groups of folks with all kinds of different ideas and identities, including Santeria. LA has an incredible branch of Santeria that, as opposed to maybe the more Legba-oriented focus of that, of voodoo or hoodoo, practice of voodoo, that it's more Paulu and what's the other one? The Ashira, that's the head, not the tail. Sorry. Anyways, it's been a while. I'm very blessed. A lot of great musicians around. I started getting introduced to a good music scene because I'm hustling between, bringing my PA to anybody who will hire me for $80 at the time period in the early 90s, which is a lot of R&B and hip hop, mostly in places that, I don't know if people know this, but in LA, you couldn't have a hip hop club in a lot of places in LA because they just thought it would be violence. So there was a lot of strange ways that hip hop clubs and R&B clubs were set up, and they always had to bring in the PA, which is good for me in many ways because it ended up introducing me to a lot of the formative hip hop world and R&B world that ended up forming into hip hop, as well as it put me in touch with folks that essentially got me the job that got me my first touring jobs when I really break it out and think about where it goes back to. It's a direct line. So somebody who got me a job at a little club for a funk band, who later got me another gig with a bigger club that did R&B, hip hop, and comedy called Spike's Comedy Exchange. That same group of folks ended up getting me the job at a place called Leeds Rehearsal Hall. And Leeds Rehearsal Hall was a place where everybody you've ever heard of, everybody you've ever seen, every great musician you ever enjoyed rehearsed there for 35 to 40 years. It was an amazing space to rehearse. It does not exist, unfortunately, any longer. It was taken away by the Los Angeles Underground, the train station, basically. Well, they sold the building to LA. In any case, so yeah, I my education and background is varied. I never graduated from anything. They actually told me I either had to stop schooling or graduate, which is a whole thing because I was getting the credits off of a state subsidy deal, or taking the classes off of state subsidy deal. So, and that went on for years just because I took so many great history classes. I took so many great physics classes. I took so many great psych classes. Chemistry of the brain still will always be one of my favorite ones. And all of this has brought me into essentially not just mixing audio, but you start with like, and by the way, in rock and roll, you always start with one task or another. It used to be that people were just like untrained, but now there's a lot of specific tech. Like we call people techs now as opposed to just roadies. A roadie really now is just somebody who pushes a box, whereas it used to be somebody who just took care of everything, right? And there's a great movie with Meatloaf called Roadie or Super Roadie, which everybody should go see. Amazing, terrible movie. Anyways, he fixes everything with like a Coke can and tuna. It's the stupidest thing. It's so funny. In any case, I started as an audio engineer. I wanted to be like Dan Healy and a couple of the other guys. And over time, you learn that there's other things you can become. And I started to realize that I really enjoyed the organization or planning the build of how we put together the show, or how the crew is put together, and how things assemble. And kind of before I got to do that, I got forced to be a tour manager, which is not just assembling the show, but assembling the entire plan for the tour and the finances and the merch, and you just got to build a tour, which, once again, put me in a place of kind of both being artist and producer of sort, caretaker. I like to call it adult babysitter, because oftentimes that's really what you are. Hint, it's a little behind the scenes, everybody. Really, tour manager, fancy adult babysitter. It's some cases. I have definitely had to go find people before the bus left, but
find their drugs probably as well.
I can say nothing about it. I have another confirm nor deny. Confirm nor deny. Yeah. I mean, I've got all kinds of wild stories about that kind of stuff. I mean, I've been very lucky where I haven't had to like go quote unquote cop drugs for anybody that I've worked for. I haven't really worked for anybody quite like that. I've worked, I have worked for folks that are kind of like that. And I have a couple great stories about that, but I wasn't in a position where I had to do their dirty work. Thankfully, in a couple of these cases okay, great. One of my favorite rock and roll stories. It's one of the most rock and roll things. And in this case, on this day, I was the responsible party. Though I wasn't generally in that position during this tour. It was like over a course of a couple of days, I had to cover some responsibilities for somebody who had to go home for a little bit. So the artist and his girlfriend, who are both very famous, are on another bus. And we're basically rolling separate of them. The actual tour manager has left. I'm the production manager, so I get the job to take over. They go off to their $10,000 a night special hotel in the Netherlands hills, or wherever the frick that thing was. I've got video of it somewhere. Actually, I have video of me standing in front of the bus right before we actually get to the hotel on that same morning. So this is the whole thing. So we roll our bus, the production bus, up to their hotel. Artist bus is across the way in this lane. We're in like some real rural area. It's a beautiful, I don't know how many rooms could have been in this fucking thing. Excuse my language. It was like a beautiful dream farmhouse place. And the whole second floor was apparently the hotel Airbnb thing. And the family lived downstairs and they took care of it. But it still had a foyer and like a welcome check-in. It was very legit. Beautiful, ridiculously beautiful. And the whole deal was that they had like pasture and cows and the Netherlands beauty, blah, blah, blah. So we get there, and the scene that we find in this hotel room is like, not just like a tornado went through this thing. It's like Hulk smash. It looked just like anything that was attached to anything was no longer attached to it. The bed was turned over. It was this rock and roll scene. Everything torn off, everything broken. Window. I mean, the French doors are just, And by the way, these two people are not very big people. They're not like, like when I worked for Jennifer Lopez, I would be afraid to get into a battle with that woman. She's all muscle. Like she would hurt someone. A great person. Actually, would actually hurt. I would got a bunch of great stories about her, by the way. I'll mention her name because she was actually a good person to work for. and gracious on levels that she doesn't get credit for, which is very strange. I think people always get to see her in the wrong way. Anyways, so the story is, so this place is smashed. We go back downstairs. We take care of the cost of the destruction. Now we have to go pick up one of the people from the police department, the local police department, because the hotel has charged for the damage, and they've also charged for the assault that's happened. Now leave the assault till the end because it's kind of the punchline of this whole thing. And they tell us that there's been an assault, and we're like, what happened? And they won't really tell us what happened. They tell us to go to the cops. They want us out their hair. So we pay the bill. We leave. We go to the cops. We go basically start to pay the fine. And the fine is for, and I shit you not, assaulting an animal. And that's because the artist's girlfriend threw a lamp out the window and it hit one of the cows in the backyard. And that's why they hauled her into jail. And you would have thought we were in LA County. Like when I came in, she was screaming back there, like, you know, like they were treating her terrible. It was actually a pretty cell, for God's sakes. We could see it was like very nice. Like, anyways. So that's, you know, rock and roll happens. Things happen on the road. People get crazy and out of control because there's a bubble of a lack of oversight. And if you aren't ready to step in between those people and themselves, sometimes they will hurt themselves, and sometimes they'll fire you because you got in the way. And some, I mean, like I've been known to, by the way, to be a proud pincushion for that kind of stuff professionally. Because I don't care if you're going to do the wrong thing and hurt yourself, I'm going to try to stop you first. And I'm never going to be blamed for you hurting yourself on my watch. That's my whole thing. You know, if I'm going to be an adult babysitter, I better freaking try to do it. Anyways, so that's one example. I have actually more stories of great things that I've seen people do, magical, wonderful, unbelievable things that humans have done in front of me, or experiences I've had, than I've had bad experiences. That's just, you know, one of them. But I have a couple of in my early days, because I was part of like my earliest experiences, by the way, were I worked for Warren G for a brief moment. I basically forced my way into that crowd, and I got that through Leeds. And then not long later, I ended up working for his cousin, Snoop, Mr. Harris. I'm sorry, Calvin Brothers. In any case, it was kind of a really interesting thing, because neither one of them is one of these flexes of like, oh yeah, I got that gig. That didn't happen until later on with other gigs. This was, I forced my way into basically being in the rehearsal as much as possible for Warren G. And so that way I was just the likely best option, cheapest option when they needed to do shows, because I was just right there. But great way to get my name, get a name on my, especially during the G-Dub era. It was the best time to be his engineer, for God's sakes. And it introduced me to a lot of other folks, including Dave Aaron, who's the guy who recorded all the Tupac stuff, who became a great friend of mine for many years. Rest in peace, Dave. And Dave was actually Tupac's best friend. So that's a whole other thing. People don't realize how interesting.
Is he still alive?
Dave? No, Dave is
Tupac.
No. And in fact,
he's not in Cuba. There's lots of
it would definitely. Well, first off, he wouldn't be the type of person that would ever hide. He would have been shot 3 times again over if that was the case. He was just an enigmatic and kind of an ego figure, man. And amongst the people that I know who knew him, they lamented his death. And if anybody was going to know, Dave would know. And I can tell you this, I saw it for myself. Dave had an entire box of DATs and different recording. I think there was even some reel-to-reel in there that really pertained to all this stuff that is like the posthumous Tupac stuff, which I've always, by the way, since Dave's death, which is coming on 5 or 6 years now, I wonder what happened with the box of tapes, because a good majority of the things that Tupac actually recorded outside of Dre's studio with Dave Aaron, I know some of it was released, but not a lot of it. There was a massive box of this stuff. So that material could be released forever. One, because Tupac was so prolific. He just kept recording and kept recording and kept recording when he wasn't otherwise acting and stuff. He was a real performer. He was also, people don't understand, he was kind of a nerd.
He
He
was.
played up to that character. He was an actor kid. You know, he wasn't Snoop. I mean, and I can say that I definitely heard conversations that spoke of him posthumously by the people who would know one way or the other, missing him. And one of them that is telling is that, okay, so in 97, I was on the Dog Pound tour that included Lollapalooza 97, which was an astonishing, crazy thing to go on as an experience. Like, still, I don't think, I mean, like, I've been on a lot of big tours with a lot of big artist stuff where we're all like grouped together and moving together. But Lollapalooza 97 was insane. It just didn't make any sense. And we all kind of knew it made no sense. It was the Dog Pound, Korn. At one point we had Devo on that tour. We had oh my god, it's gonna blanking. He was one name. Oh, I'm blanking on so many of the acts right now. There were so many really interesting folks on that tour that just didn't match. Korn was our neighbors the whole time on tour, by the way, for that, which was very interesting. I have a picture of us recording. I actually had to build a little studio, which at the time, it took up so much space at the late 90s.
I'll run down the list for you. Snoop, Tool, Tricky, Failure, James, Devo, Elf,
James, that's
Prodigy, Korn,
thank you,
Orbital, and The Orb.
Yeah, there were so many weird, awesome acts. I ate lunch with dude from Tool and Tricky on more than one occasion. Just being the nerds at the nerd table for real. There was a lot of that went around. There are somewhere I have photographs in a book somewhere of the drummer from Tool and Snoop's uncle and Snoop and a bunch of people in the Dog Pound playing basketball all together. Like, it was a really fun summer. It was all sorts of weird things happened. Korn had to leave that tour. And I know I was there for the reason why. Dude got sick because he jumped in the Cleveland River and we told him not to. It was just there's all kinds of, that was a crazy, crazy summer. And meanwhile, by the way, that story is actually pretty interesting. Because I was very young to tour. I literally was just flying by the seat of my pants, asking people around that I knew who had toured before about proper touring etiquette. And here's the thing is that I was the stupid young kid. I'd even add young white kid because I started working for Snoop as a thing where a dude named Tommy D came in to the rehearsal room while I was sweeping the floor. I literally had a trash can in one hand. I was sweeping the floor with the other into the trash can. And Tommy D was this guy who worked at Michael Jackson's studio. And his story is a weird story too. But so he asked me if I knew how to do audio. And I said, sure do, because I'm going to say yes no matter what. He said, well, you want to do monitors? I said, sure. I didn't know for who. And he said, great. Come on in with me. So I followed him into the second room and I knew immediately who I was getting hired by because I knew who was in the rooms. And so, I went with it. Tommy ended up leaving at the second show, right at the beginning of showtime. It's one of the things that locked my job in because I saved a moment where about, I think there was about 20,000 people there. I could have been 12 to 20,000. Let's just say it was a really massive, audience of people very early on in my career. During the analog age, there's nothing digital going on. And, it's all still huge consoles and I'm standing on boxes to reach the top of my console. And, I'm 5'9", by the way. So the joke of the time period was I might not be tall enough to be a front of house engineer. Which used to be a thing. Front of house engineer, by the way, is the person who mixes the show. That's really what I've primarily been, as far as an engineer is concerned. So what the audience hears as opposed to what the band hears on stage, which is monitor guy. So at that gig, I was monitors, willing to take anything. I think I was making maybe $200 a night, just like I should have been asking for 3 times that, for a full 56 channels band on the other side of the stage, 8 wireless Roman, a huge, I think the stage that we had was like an 80 by 80 deck. I know I had what were called EAW 850s at the time, but I had 2 sets of them, these huge, what we normally use just as one set of PA on each side of the stage. I basically had 2 sets of them downstage and 2 sets of them upstage, and on either side of the stage. It was just so loud. It was its own PA. So in any case, the first show we did went decently, but it was like a big club. And the second show we did was at this massive basketball arena thing. And we'd spent all day. Soundcheck had gone fairly decently until one of the consoles had taken a crap. We had to replace the console, which was my console, and it came back up pretty nicely. Everybody was happy with soundcheck. Went away. Show starts. Band's on late, as per the usual of that time period of the Dog Pound, and show actually begins. It's late, but about maybe like less than a minute into the first song, I can hear that a howl, a feedback is starting to howl, but it's a slow, low roller, that's a term for, which is a very scary thing when you're talking about a PA of that size in front of an audience of that nature and that scale, because that could just start everybody screaming in a panic. Much less it could cause all kinds of other traumatic things to happen. And my first thing is I check me, which is I've got a pair of wedges behind me that let me hear what's going on stage. I'm listening through all my mixes. I run up to the side of the stage. I start getting threats. You better fix that shit. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, no problem. I hear it really starting to take off. I go, this isn't me, and I mute the stage. And everybody on stage realizes it's front of house, and everybody points to front of house. And Snoop comes over to the side of the stage, and I unmute because I can see him trying to talk to me. And he goes, Aaron, fix that shit. And I went like this and turned. And the moment I turned, there was a spotlight. And this is exactly what happened. Hold on a second. This is exactly what happened. It was like this. Immediately, there was 8,000 people straight up, in my face, just right there. Everybody on the floor looking straight at me. Why? Because they had put the spotlight on me. So not only could everybody see who and where I was, everybody on the floor had a straight shot to me because I'm on the side of the stage and there's like hardly any barrier. And I could literally see people like when I say 8,000 people, I don't mean the whole of the audience. I mean the people who are literally on the deck at my same level, who have arm's reach access to me at that moment in time. And Snoop has just said my name on stage and said, fix it, as if it was my fault. So panic and fear at heat, spotlight, heat. Okay, now what do? I fucking mute monitors altogether. I book so everybody can see that I'm actually giving a damn. I run all the way to front of house. I get to front of house and I see a very confused staff of support technicians, all the people from the audio company who brought the PA and whatever. And there I could see the A2, who's the guy who basically was there to support, or we could call him A1 if you mix the other act. But he's basically staying there at the console like, I don't know what to do, bro. And I'm like, what happened? He said, yeah, your boy, he just, started the show, unmuted, looked around, pushed up the faders and left. I looked down on the console. All the faders have been shoved up to the top of the console. He didn't do this on accident. He did this on purpose.
Wow.
Which, by the way, in 2007 on the Zingolati cruise, I found out exactly why, because I ran into Tommy D again later on, even though the man had disappeared off the face of the earth at that moment. And he literally did, when I say disappear off the face of the earth. I was told a horrible story that people showed up and threatened his life at the beginning of that show as the show started. And the only thing he could think of to do was to cause a commotion. So he threw all the faders up and ran out the door and left me with the fucking bag. Excuse my language. But that's
Did he
welcome to rock and roll, bro. What's that?
Did he confirm it when you ran into him?
Yeah. No, but my first question was, I'm standing behind him in the line for the Zingolati cruise, getting ready to check in with the band. And here's dude in front of me. It was one of these moments of like, bro, Tommy D? You know what I mean? Like it was one of those fucking moments where like I do. Oh, hey, bro, you were the dude with Snoop, bro. Where? And the first question out of my mouth, where did you go? Like as if it was like yesterday. It was straight up, where did you go? Like, oh man. People who had stolen a bunch of stuff from a studio apparently had shown up to the show because they thought he was going to snitch, threaten his life. He left and moved. He literally went back home, grabbed his stuff, and left. Like moved to someplace else. And his story at that time period was that he had only just kind of come up for air, kind of thing. It was like, wow, bro, oh, you left me high and dry. I almost got, you know, my ass whooped that night just for being involved. You know, I literally my standing up for myself that night, and what I did, which was to run to the front of the house, recognize what was happening, not worry about whether he was coming back or not. I pulled it all back into the thing. I called through the talk back to stage, told them to get going. The guy on stage at monitors, who was my A2 at monitors, unmuted monitors. I mixed about half a song to make sure everything was good with the band, and turned to the front of house guy, technician who was with the audio company, said, congratulations, you get to mix Snoop tonight. And I went back to my job at monitors and got through the whole show. And it was a great show actually. And then it was a really good, really loud, very clean show with, you know, older box equipment, point and shoot stuff. And it's funny to think about because afterwards they were going to fire me because I was just, you know, audio people, you know, and it took me literally standing at a doorway with this dude, Minister James, who ended up being a very nice guy, holding me. It was a former linebacker or something from the 49ers, actually, or lineman. It was just a monster of a dude. And he was one of the security guys. And he had his hand on my chest. And I'll never forget this. His hand, you know, I'm putting my hand on my chest. His hand was across my chest. It was so big that it literally crossed my chest. And he's the one who stopped me at the doorway. And I was like, what, you're not gonna let me come in? And so he said, no, man, you're fired. And that's when I got upset and basically yelled at the whole room, which I'm still to this day. I'm like, man, I must have been out of my mind and young and dumb. Yelled at the whole room full of people. And I mean, everybody was in there. Nate, Daz, Corrupt, Warren was in there. All of the background singers, and Snoop sitting there rolling out, right? And everybody got silent as I'm screaming, I'm the only one who cares. I'm the only one who ran out and fixed this. I'm the only one. Wait, you're gonna fire the one person who showed up for the job and has been here since this morning? What is wrong with you people? And I kid you not, this is what Calvin said. It's all right, man. Come in. I worked for him for the next year and a half. That's actually how I passed the test right there. There was other tests, by the way. I did get jumped by Trey D in a hallway on a tour. He wanted my play jacket because I had gotten a bunch of play gear, and apparently they had missed him out, and he just didn't ask me for it. So he decided that jumping me in the hallway was for it. Which, by the way, the whole scenario ended up making us friends because I definitely defended myself. But in any case, these are when we're talking about like the rough times of rock and roll. This is in the 90s too. You know, everything was on paper. We were still booking tours out of Yellow Pages and you know, connections. There wasn't an internet to really, or video to film unless you had the camera, you know. My tapes of the period are on cassette. And, you know, I got very lucky also because I met Uncle Charlie Wilson on that tour when we went on Lollapalooza. And then I got to go out with the Gap Band as front of house and really mix a band, and not just mix any band, but mix the Gap Band, you know, which was just a party for 2 years pretty much. I actually ended up taking 2 other gigs. By the way, at home, I ended up working at the House of Blues LA, which I got to work with from early 96 until about 2000, 2001, which is kind of murky because I picked up a bunch of spot dates in there too. And I was also working with bands that were going to the House of Blues all the time. So that time period. Though 2000, yeah, you know what I mean? It's like I've
been there, and it's great, fantastic place. So my favorite part of LA was Hermosa Beach, but
Oh, nice.
really, really like, the House of Blues was a good time there as well.
I love that you got to actually see the House of Blues. That was a special place, man. Isaac Tigert, the guy who built the House of Blues, same dude who built the pyramid in Memphis, same dude who started the Hard Rock. I got to work directly for him a little bit, like just inadvertently, kind of like he was there and he's the boss, so you're working with him. And on my very first day at the House of Blues, doing the kids show in the morning. And this I come in, and this dude in a dashiki and long robe kind of thing is putting out chairs for the kids with a big old blunt in his hand. And I'm like, bro, I don't know if that's going to be acceptable. We're going to get in trouble, bro. And he said, don't worry about it, because he owned the place. And Isaac was really a visionary. House of Blues LA also meant a lot. Apparently, it was kind of a culmination of a lot of different attempts at the House of Blues, because he had originally like the Cambridge one, which was more of a one-room space, really neat spot while it was open. And I'm trying to remember if Chicago wasn't open yet. What was the name of that other spot in Atlanta? Tabernacle in Atlanta had already opened. But one of the things that Isaac did that was really special, by the way, was to inundate spiritual intention, positive happiness, control the demons, any good juju he could put anywhere, or just imbue the halls with, he would and did. And there's many magical things that people don't realize were in the House of Blues, that when he no longer worked there, a lot of it got pulled out because it was his own private collection in a lot of cases. But for instance, the foundation room in LA had pieces he had saved from Tibetan temples that were being torn down. It had a whole secret area in the Ganesh room that literally those pieces that were just waiting to go back to a temple when it was ready. The furnishing and the sconcing and the wood on the walls was all from the sister ship to the Titanic up there. There's so many things. The curtain on stage was sewn by a bunch of ladies who are all from this quilting circle that's been around for 100 years or something like that, and they imbue some magical sensitivity to things. We had a mojo rug that was on stage forever and ever, and before he left, the only time it ever was removed, a water main broke, so it really, it wasn't allowed to be moved off stage. We had a lot of little weird, interesting things there that between the found art and the fact that as employees at the House of Blues, we were all taught and basically encouraged to be a part of the help ever hurt never idea, which is that everybody's here to have a good time. Everybody comes from a different background. Everybody has a different belief in their head. So show them that we can all unify under this banner of music. And I know you talk a lot about vibration and frequency usage and the cohesive background of, and this is where I can get woo-woo a bit, is that, one of the things I found as an audio engineer and as a person who organizes for concerts and for bands and such, is that there are these cohesive flows, a actual connection between the vibration of the music, which is what the music is. It's vibration incarnate, and also the fact that everything that we are, you and I, everything that's in reality is vibrating. It's all part of a system that is nothing less than vibration. If you want to, I'm being reductive, by the way, because frequency is vibration. Frequency is just the explanation of what scale it's in. And frequency is the ability to say that there's a certain response or a how quick that vibration or slow that vibration is. So that's really the thing to keep in mind when we say frequency. So for instance, matter has a frequency, and matter comes up because of an interference wave. The wave that makes the interference pattern that makes matter is no different in any way, shape, or form than an audio wave, except that it is of a different particulate. In this case, we hear an audio wave, which is air being disturbed, the vibration off that air, or in many cases, the speaker excursion is moving in and out in the case of a speaker. And this excites the air at different velocities, that velocity being the frequency. Reality, there's nothing different than that. And that's one of the great things that growing up, basically educating myself and really taking in the vastness of what could possibly be, whether it be the history of man or the esoteric or you name it. I'm trying to understand all of the things that make us us and what makes reality, why we believe it to be, why we believe ourselves to be. All these things start to come into play from the different schools for me. And it really was the House of Blues, actually, and watching so many different audiences go through their moment in that space, and the space just consuming and returning reciprocally that energy very palpably. There's a lot of that time, by the way, I was on monitors because people more often have a front of house engineer when they tour in the smaller clubs, 1,200 seaters, than they do a monitor engineer, at least at the time period. Nowadays, it's actually a little different. Most of anyways, it's about half and half nowadays. In any case, I got to see my earliest personal, direct, I'm standing here, my hands are on the electronic equipment. I can feel the pulsation of the crowd. I can literally feel being a part of this, as opposed to when you are part of it directly, creating the energy flow or standing there, just observing it. Because growing up around the Grateful Dead, I was shown a lot of this science early on. I just didn't have anything to apply it to. I was shown how lights stimulate, how the color of the lighting and the frequency, which is the color, stimulates people. I didn't know that these were chemically induced or that we actually have autonomic responses to these variances. Which brings me to basically, in my belief systems, where I've come through is an amalgamation of not only my experiences as an engineer and watching people have culminative or very explosive experiences as a group. I even say I believe I've heard the voice of God in metaphor, from an audience one night. They sang Boa Sorte to us. They sang in Portuguese to us the other half of the song, but they sang it and it sounded like one massive voice. So I take these things and initially I think I like to see them as they are, take them for as they are. But over time, I have really learned that there is a thing there's very much a qualitative or quantitative fact to us all being unified in vibration, unified in form, unified in similarity, in that our only differences come down to a perception of this. And we actually even recently have a Nobel Prize for 3 different particle physicists. I'm sorry, there's 2 theoretical physicists and a particle physicist who have essentially, I don't want to say proven, but they have theorized in a quantitative fashion that reality is localized to our perception and can show this scientifically repeatedly. So
double slit experiment kind of shows that as well.
Yes, exactly. The interference pattern of the double slit experiment is actually where it starts with their discoveries. But it goes further than that to say that the local reality does not form outside of perception because it cannot. It is wholly supplied by the ability to perceive it as such. And if you want to get tech about it, the interference patterns can't be formed without a reciprocal reflective. And that reciprocal reflective takes an observing point of view. And even if there isn't a sentient being, quote unquote, there to observe it, meaning maybe there's a mechanical device, or maybe it's the trees. Even if it's that, it'll change. A neutron will change into, electron will change into an interference pattern. And even stranger about that, from a wave or a particle, it will change its behavior into interference, becoming matter. And it really does this in a strange way, which is the other portion of the findings that is so astonishing, is it doesn't do it in the moment. It doesn't do it when, let's say, you or I or the tree sees it. It goes back to the beginning of time, as one could be perceived, and changes its route so that it will become that interference pattern at that moment. Which is which is the whole thing about why it is fairly likely that, and very plausible based off of that response, that we live in what could otherwise be considered a holographic format of universe. That's something I've really. Sorry, go ahead.
That's what David Icke thinks. It's a holographic universe, and we're electrical beings, and everything around us is frequency and vibration. And it's sad that the medical mafia seems to ignore these facts, and they just want to push allopathic drugs when there's so much more to this universe than just this, skin suit that, we're all able to reside in.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we see time and time again that humans can really become transcendental, that they can transcend the human form, both also the human experience. I don't think we can have a combined experience, or at least an empathy for one another, if there isn't this sense of similarity in the background. And I that mostly comes from our chemical and electrical drives. That sense of empathy is part of our drive system, and it's not an incentive, which if you were to break it out into what those things are, it's a sense of somebody else's being. That alone is proof that we are very much aware of each other's flowing, into one another, and just limiting ourselves. I think, therefore I am is the actual truth. Yeah, I think, therefore I am, because we weren't thinking as a free will, we would be the background energy, right? So, yeah, I'm sorry. There is, and actually, one of the things I think that lends its most credence to the holographic universe theory is the actual physics of how the universe seems to be functioning. Most recently, there was a number of papers written on how light was formed at the beginning of our perception of its time. For sake of argument, it's looked at as a large egg-shaped oval with a white hole on one end and a black hole on the other. So that time, everything we know, happens within this oval shape and then ends in the black hole, which most people may not understand. We're not a static universe. We are hurtling from one place as a big giant set of rotating discs of dust and calamity, like we were shot out of a big open barrel gun, and that's why our that's, by the way, one of these really strange things that makes us look like atoms. If you really look at us from the meta, all of our structure in the galaxy looks like an atom. If you're really to just compare the two, you can't. I'm sorry, I've gotten off topic a little bit, but
it's okay. Do you align with the evolution theory?
Yeah, I think that we've got most of that right. I think that the way that genetics drive evolution, I'm sure there's still some deep holes in it, but we can really easily see evolution happen even in certain animals' lifetimes. Which there's a great example for right now with the black frogs in Siberia, the ones who got hit with the higher levels of radiation from Chernobyl. These same frogs were a light green just 25 years ago, and they've discovered that they have essentially recreated a better defense, which is there's evolution for you. Within our lifetime, within like 2 decades, which was not long ago unthinkable. And yet we're starting to see that this is very likely amongst all species here because of the biomechanical, I would guess, or have to call it a malleability to our own planet. We're kind of all from these things, so we're likely to morph to the best option. Not everybody's going to survive that, but a couple generations down, you're going to see the attributes, which is what that is. Evolution is just the best attributes being passed on to the next of kin, and that also has to do with whether or not a species actually finds the diversity to do that, which is where evolution also gets it right, because that's how you get certain breeds of animal that just die out because they become monoclassed, and suddenly or they just don't have the genome to breed in another way, like zebras. I think zebras can breed with like donkeys, and donkeys can breed with horses, right? But not with ponies, like weird stuff like that, where like there's certain genomes, like you'd think it's just the same animal, right? No, they have nothing to do with one another. They can't breed. They won't produce offspring, whereas, yeah, so I do ascribe to it because scientifically, that's just what I was going to say about the universe. And I'll bring this back to the scientifically. And this is the thing is I have always used the scientific method to work out validity of things. That's the biggest deal about me. And I think a lot of people don't like it, is because I do come from a very scientific background, a really, I'm capable of extrapolating on theory and then bringing it into the real world because I'm an engineer. I come from an engineer family, so I still have that engineer brain. But I also love to look at the esoteric. I love to look at these things and that make us question reality, right? Which brings me to the whole thing of the universe being holographic. And it would explain why we're evolutionary if we're actually computationally holographic, because of course, kerneling and CSS in a program is going to adjust heal and correct over time for adjustments, but that's a different story. Anyways, the larger picture is that we have discovered that light is the friction response, precursor wave in front of matter forming. So matter in mass, when say the Big Bang, quote unquote, or the big expulsion, less than bang, more about splitting of things, big burp happen, like a bubble, really is what they're the math is really showing. Which is a lot. This is a lot of it is when in doubt, look at the math. And if the higher theoretical mathematicians are coming up with similar responses and results over and over again on multiple places on the planet, you're likely looking at at least for this moment in time, best result. It doesn't mean that result can't change to a degree, but it definitely is a best result. Getting closer, we would say. And this, by the way, is something that a lot of people don't understand about me as well. I would say in this facet is I am willing to take in new information or drop information that becomes invalid because, well, we can only know we can possibly compute. And this is why I believe evolution is actually a great example of why the universe is a holographic computation. You've got a precursor wave that is friction creating light in front of matter. So you've got this that creates an explosion of friction. That friction is light only because it's reflecting off of the matter itself. That's the friction of matter reflecting off of itself. And if you look at it when you stand back, the picture we have is that it looks kind of like a big network of tubes, brain-like. And the glows that we see from it from afar are, the light reflecting off of the dust. And otherwise there is none. That said, if there was no light to reflect off the dust, would we exist at all? Unlikely. How does that light reflect off the dust? Oh, in a fractal nature. Where does fractal math come into play? Well, you don't get the kind of deflection, diffraction, or optional dimension without the fractal math to develop what's called permutation or computational permutation. One of the reasons why there is no unified field theory or universal law of gravity is because most of the universe is driven by this fractal and math, a seeming randomness that has a base platform in it. And again, this is really important to understand, at least of how I look at these things, because you may start with the same elements, but you always get different permutation and options, and it's happening in an infinitesimal amount of ways, just infinitely. That's a very strange thing in itself, I guess, from a human's point of view. And I think that where I jump or extrapolated off to computational is that it is always permutating as many options, as many variances of its original order as possible. And if you've ever looked at fractal and math, they're very thought out. The actual permutations and the computation of it, how we get to light, how we get to matter, it's intelligent. It's almost aware of itself. It's very weird. It makes forms. It's so knowing this. And by the way, there was a period in time where my late friend Jason Haight and I, in the this would be 96. It was before I went on tour. We spent a lot of time getting real stoned and playing with fractal and programs and opening up the, you ended up having to learn some of the math to play with the programs. And we just, turn his 386 on for like 5 days for the damn thing to line by line render these beautiful, like semi 3D fractal things. Which is, but when I say I'm multi-schooled, I'm a nerd. Like, give me some art, give me some projects. There's always all kinds of things going on with me. So when people are wondering, oh, how do you do all these things? Well, man, because I never fucking stop. It's never stopped. I'm always doing something, or 4 things actually normally. In any case, when we talk about this reality and it forming around us and the frequency and us being one, the fact that we come from, there is no choice but to have come from the dust around us. We come from this planet. Yeah, toxic. I kind of hate math, but then there's some math I actually love. I'm sorry, I just saw Toxic Girl. What up? Yeah, I have just had a great amount of love and grown a great amount of affection, I should say, is better than love. A great amount of affection for not just humanity, but all of everything and the wonder of it all. I've seen 100,000 people sing together in harmony as if they were one person. I've seen magical shit. One of my artists one night, she's 6 feet tall. She's an African singer. She did a backflip in high heels she had in-ears. She had a wireless mic in her hand. She did a backflip in high heels on a rainy night wearing a dress. And she did it without even blinking. And she kept dancing. I was like, I can't, what the hell? Magical things happen. You can look off into the night sky and through a telescope see our nearby planets. That alone, the fact that we can see the scale of our own tininess, should be awe-inspiring to people. But it's never, we live this very tiny life in a very vast space, and it's hard for most people to perceive any of these things, much less waste their time. And I say waste their time because for some of us, what is a life's endeavor is a waste to somebody else, because they're busy doing something they find important. I don't think it is personally, but I've definitely been told why, or made fun of for even thinking these things in some cases, because I really do have a reverence and have had, as I get older, more and more of a faith in what is now, I now have come to learn is, has a term for it. It's called the absolute. The absolute being the all being in the background, beyond the veil of all realities, you know. You know, I didn't get there until I started to study the work from MK Ultra and the Gateway Project, you know. And once I started actually looking at the government public files and then reading some of the science of the people who worked on the programs, much less the fact that there's an astonishing book that details all the science surrounding the Kozarov mirror. And it's very, I mean, it has been peer reviewed. So it's a science paper about remote viewing. And what's important about that is that, and this is what ties a lot of my beliefs together, by the way. A lot of what I've become to have faith in all of us as one computational being, giving best options, and amongst many other things. Because a lot of people don't have hope for the now. And this is where, by the way, I will say we should all have a lot of hope for ourselves and humanity and our being in general, because we're having a super rare experience if we're to just take the face value view of the universe, right? So
do you think that we're manifestors and creators, and do you believe in a creator or a god, you know, that some people like to call it?
Yeah, I definitely have faith. I mean, the absolute is a good word for it, because it's a nice way to wrap up that same kind of deism without saying it's a he, she, or it at all. I do have a lot of faith in the fact that everything is alive. I mean, right now it could be that we're inside of a big brain, and that and most likely, if you put it in comparative to everything else, we are this very, very, very tiny who's in Whoville on top of the little, you know, dust speck that hasn't been seen by Horton. And you know, when you put us in comparison to everything else, it's very likely that we're inside of some other organism, or as the theory around the absolute suggests, that we are, and the math of the universe suggests, and the way things are waveforms suggests. Also, the fact that the majority of matter is unseen to us. We presumably are more like a background program. And I say this with all love of that we have a very permeable life. We not so much manifest, but can focus on something, and with the help of others, make it come true. We can change ourselves and morph ourselves and do all kinds of things. You know, we can better ourselves. We can change the world if we really set ourselves to it and gather enough folks around us. We can make that reality real. So yeah, we kind of are manifestors, but we're great tool users, and the tool being the reality around us, and the fact that we can see what we need out of it. And some people do it terribly, in bad ways, myopically, and some people do it in ways that really bring things to fruition. But it's never just magical. And we could talk about that on a separate level, because I find it very interesting that in the esoteric world, all of the witchcraft, all the grimoire, it all responds to, no matter where it is, Aleister Crowley or anybody, they're always calling to another being in another dimension to help us. So I've come to believe that there is no actual quote unquote magic here in this dimension, that we need the assistance of the closest dimensions to us, which is, you know, sounds pretty crazy, but we live in a multi-dimensional atmosphere where we only see 3 or sense 4 dimensions. There is likely up to 10 in any one platitude, which brings me around to the whole thing of, because there are multiple dimensions and we don't perceive most of them, it's pretty likely that we are components of a system we can't comprehend computationally. And because so many people report moving on to a next reality when they have an NDE, I have added in, and with my own experiences as well, strange as they are, I have come to believe that we are living our lives here and giving ourselves in some meta greater opportunities. And there is likely because of the way, by the way, interference patterns happen via changes in the neutron, at the electron at the beginning of time, not at the moment things happen. It suggests that there is kind of a binary or A-B reasoning computationally in any one experience. And I was saying in NDE's near-death experiences, life doesn't seem to end if it's not over, meaning like a lot of people experience just moving on into another life in themselves in a reality that looks just the same with very minute differences, which is easily explained by the interference pattern and electronic, I get this wrong, neutrons replacing each other across dimensions, which is a current theory, which meaning that there's a part of general matter that can move around between the dimensions. In any case, I'm getting really weird with it. I believe that we're basically feeding off or part of a whole massive series of realities playing across many different planes that give our greater selves somewhere the best options. And it's repeating forever because sentient life is a joy, because sentient life is love. That greater being is all of us and everything that has ever existed as one huge brain in a null, essentially, that is endless. And the great metaphor for it that's been going on in humanity since forever in multitude of ways is the story of Sisyphus and the stone, and how time, Chronos, tells him to go off the snake who's found its tail. And the snake who found its tail is the metaphor for the absolute. It's a computational, never-ending experience. And I would even go so far as to say that the reason that we all exist and the reason that we have reality and the reason that things are permeable and interesting and give us options and terror and happiness and sadness is because that greater everything, which is made up of all things and experiences, it found that it wanted to repeat and make the best out of being. And that's, we get this, by the way, this idea of the absolute from remote viewers going beyond just remote viewing on the planet, but to seeing past what they call the veil and getting to a point where there's a null of just all information. And we've read about this in human history's religious beliefs. There's plenty of beliefs that believe that their head are going to blow off if they see the name of God and such. And this is no different than that. And it suggests that here we have the free will to change things. And there, when we actually return, whenever that is, we are part of all information. And it suggests that we actually return from that information to gather more in this repeating fashion, that all of us are bits and bytes, part of a whole, part of the same, probably sharing these things. Yeah, man, I do believe in it. I have greater faith as I've gotten older that there is something combining us that loves the sentience, loves the experience. And I know a lot of people would challenge me when I say that I believe that living is heaven.
I've always said that this is heaven to me. I can't imagine a place ever in existence that we have the ultimate freedom to love, touch, taste, feel, experience. Like, this is the ultimate experience. It's, unfortunate that, the need for greed and to control and dominate others has taken forth on this place and has caused, because of the dangling golden carrot, money, to get people to do horrific things to each other, because if that wasn't the case, and if there was abundance for all, that this would truly be the Garden of Eden or heaven, what I think it was truly meant to be here. So I'm with you there. We have Tim Hamby from our YouTube channel, and welcome to all your people from, you know, your YouTube. You're streaming it to your
I think I
YouTube.
did see
Um,
Lizard Tree. I think she shared.
Yeah, Liz, you got a bunch of people there on your
All right.
YouTube. This is the Missing Link. I'm the host, Jesse Hall. I interview people from all around the world, from every walk of life, and just trying to get as many different perspectives as possible. This is our 693rd interview that we've done in about 3 years that we've been doing this. But Tim Hamby from our YouTube channel says, my biggest fear is that we all are just reincarnated over and over like Groundhog's Day. For me, I love this place. I love this journey. I've been having a blast. You know, I've been, you know, obviously rattling the cages and walking my own, you know, step. I haven't been, you know, I've been kind of awake and aware for most of my life, if not
Mm.
all of my life. So I've had a pretty wild, fun, you know, journey, and I love this. So if I come right back here, that's, you know, not an issue for me, but not everybody has that same experience, and not everybody is enjoying this ride. And some people dread the fact that they
Mm.
could be reincarnated and come back here, like I guess like Tim Hamby was saying.
So there's an interesting thing about that is and I've shared this story on Jack's show, by the way, but I think there's a really interesting point of view of like whether or not people see themselves in Job's life, or whether they see the troubles as and trials, tribulations of actual life as the challenge that makes the love and beauty that much more sweet. Because otherwise there is no, I think, and this is one of these things is even the greed and terror has its place in getting us to evolve past it. Living in the moments where that exists sucks. And it is up to us to be the spiritual warriors, the intentive minds, those people who stand up and hold on a second. Where is it? I think I actually have it on tap here. I oh no, did I close it out? Don't tell me I did. Oh yes, and of course it's not going to bring it back up, is it? Hold on, give it 2 seconds. I think it is. I often bring up this page. It's now going to give me a hard time, huh? Yeah. Oh, here he is. This man's Andrew Langemesser, which I'm always telling people be Mr. Langemesser, because Langemesser was the guy in this picture. And it's up to us, by the way, as if whatever you want to call it, spiritual warriors or people that give a damn, you know, those that won't be folded by the crowd. Be Mr. Langemesser. This is what I'm all about. It's like, you know, look at this. And by the way, he paid the ultimate price. He paid the ultimate price for that. Not only was he thrown in prison later on, but they ended up killing him in the concentration camps after they killed his wife. And I say these things because we're not there, and let's be thankful and comparative. This is why I also bring this picture up, because we're not here. You know, we're way past there. That could always happen. We should always be aware it can happen. But the point of this being is that if we don't take that right or privilege we have as an individual who gives a damn, who isn't living through their fears, and some of us need to do that for others because they don't see enough of we don't see enough courage, I think, a lot of the time. I don't know. How do you feel about that, man? That's what I tend to think it is that I don't think that we see a lot of bravery when it comes to the peer pressure of, well, allowing the bad guys to win just because they have more. Because of course, and that's the thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's because of almost maybe even like pictures like that tell people, and then they tell the story. Yeah, and he was stood up and he was thrown in prison and he was murdered. And, you know, if that maybe never even actually happened, you know, maybe that's just part of their indoctrination tools to get people to not stand up. And, you know, part of what's going on is there's a mass poisoning that's going around, not just in the mind, the heart, the soul. but the body as well. There's lots of chemical imbalances, hormonal imbalances. There's, plastics and pesticides and preservatives, and we're being bombarded with all of these chemicals, fluoride, making people docile, making guys think they're girls and girls think they're guys, and all the weird stuff that's going along with the mass poisoning of not only, again, our body, but our mind, our soul. Everything is being off balance. And I
Mhm.
think when people aren't, fully standing on their square in their true power, appreciating who they are, then they're easily manipulated, and then they're less likely to stand up against, tyranny, if, they don't even know, the power that resides within themselves.
So it's very interesting. I agree on some portions of this, but I disagree on some other things. And I want to pose this question to you. What do you think is easier to sell to people? A disenfranchisement of diversity, or disenfranchisement from diversity as abnormal, or the diversity as normal? Because this is a big deal.
I'm not comprehending. Can you maybe go a little bit,
what
elaborate on the question?
What do you think is easier for somebody who intends to sell anger or disenfranchisement, who would have, and what do you think the agenda would actually be for somebody who would or an organization, let's for the sake of argument, and I always boil it down to the 1400. These are the wealthiest people on the planet, who we can absolutely say have a hand in everybody's lives in an unseen way. We don't talk about this very often. There's 1,400 people on the planet that have 40% of the world's wealth. Forget about everything else. Don't look at the corporations. Don't look at the governments. Look at the people who have the majority of the planet's wealth. And you'll find the people who own everything. It's pretty direct, actually. And so this is the question I have to you when I talk about these people or any of these systems. Do you think it's easier to sell a disbelief in diversity and variance in life as an untrustworthy thing, or is it easier to sell diversity as norm?
I'm still not completely comprehending the question, because it's easier for them to get everybody to look outside of themselves instead of looking within. And
Yes.
once you look within, and find out, sometimes there's some dark night of the soul, depending on how much trauma you've had to go through throughout your life. But it's easier to think you're someone else, to pretend you're someone else, to forget about who you are, and especially with all the chemical manipulations that boost things along the way for people, than it is to, appreciate love, stand in that power, and then look to try to be the best possible you, opposed to this whole Hollywood facade of creating some other character, because I resonate more with something else than they do with their own selves.
Well, I think that one of the things that let's separate two things, so that I think it's important for there to be characters, by the way, to drive stories and interests and things, because if you don't have those, oftentimes people will, and we've seen it right now, become fascist and confusing people's personality with their beliefs, and that can become very dangerous for people very quickly. But otherwise, and to 2 points, actually, before I forget this. One, I haven't seen a whole lot of efficacy to the information about the poisoning side directly. I've seen anecdotal, I've seen a lot of chemically, and yeah, there's no question, we've definitely seen several different revolutions or evolutions of people getting poisoned by stuff like lead. And there's a great history on how and why Rome really fell, because of the amount of lead in their water. And it really actually does drive people crazy. It starts wars. There's all sorts of stuff like that. So that chemical influence is a very real thing. Currently, I have looked at this too. I'm stretched to find the actual connection cohesively across the planet to any one thing. And even fluoride doesn't really do it well, because it's too when you do the chemical breakout in the water table, especially in LA, you end up with things that are more corrosive or dangerous than the fluoride in the water, which in large amounts, no question, it actually can cause issues with neurological function. Which is always interesting to me, like, oh, so enough aluminum and you do get early onset Alzheimer's, brain shrinkage, and things like this. But here's where actually you and I might align on this, is that I do believe in the soma concept. Soma being what Huxley described as the imbibing drug, where you take a little bit of it and you're chilled out, a little more of it and you're real subdued, take it all and you have no personality any longer. I believe, and I see a lot of evidence around high frame rate film, doom scrolling, use of digital appliance, background frequency that dips down into the 6.24 hertz zone, where there's background noise and vibration happening, and also digital noise happening, whether it be in your phone, and the high frame rate and the constant stimuli that burns out sections of the neurological functioning of your right lobe, which is information description, to your left lobe, which is creative or metaphoric understanding, let's just say. But what I have found two different studies within a whole group of other studies that are studying or looking at, and it's not conclusive, but mind you, but it is very interesting data that shows high frame rate film, high frame rate gaming, doom scrolling on high frame rate film not only retrains the brain, but can cause what's called aphasia, which is tiny neurological dysfunction, brain damage, tiny misfirings. And if anything, that's where I'm seeing the drug. That's where I'm seeing the poisoning, because that turns people, that's worse than lead in the water. That's worse than all the rest of it. And mind you, we can, if you've ever read The Informant, that's an incredible book about how much crap is just in our food that does nothing. It does nothing good for us. It does nothing bad. It's just crap that they're just selling. And that's, I didn't really know the depth of that world until you read about Archer Daniels Midland, and that story is nonfiction, by the way. So it's pretty astonishing what they describe and the functions of companies that do fillers and flavors and things. It's just horrifying. So totally true. There's a component of it that is and rather than an intentional poisoning, let me pose it to you this way. It's a lack of concern. That's what I feel it is, because we are, what's the statement? The weaker meat and the strong shall eat. Is that what the statement? I think that's how it goes. I mean, that's kind of the concept that a lot of the 1400 have. You don't get that kind of wealth. You don't get that kind of power. You don't get that kind of without being a psychopath. And in some cases, good leaders need enough psychopathy and sociopathy and all these little neurosis things that make up, that all of us actually need a little tiny bit of in healthy doses. But when you see the great leaders need a little tiny bit more, but dictators, it only takes a little bit more than that and they become a dictator. These things are very fine lines, and it makes the difference between good leaders and bad leaders and people that are not leaders, because we don't know them. They just have a rule over our life because they own stuff. They don't give a damn. That's the most despicable thing about it. We can give it all kinds of reasons and cabal and all. No, they don't give a damn. If we want to talk about conspiracy and control and weird influence, let's talk about the Golden Dawn. What everybody calls the Illuminati. Let's call out their freaking lapdogs that go and send avatars to harm people for imagined power, because, and by the way, their magic does that magic, that black magic, that kill magic, all that stuff, excuse me, that seems to have a powerful influence, because you do actually have both personal, political, and also a metaphoric, esoteric influence just by intent. Because nobody's going to go against a group if they're willing to send out an avatar to destroy your whole family, right? Like, forget about the actual magic. The magic is you ain't never going to fight against them. That's the magic. That's the power of doom and control, you know? So I find it interesting that we fight all these battles against imagined entities. When the entities are there, we can see them. And we need more voices like yours, Jesse, you know, but it is hard to wade through the information. And I can't say that I'm any more an expert than anybody else. I can only say what I've found personally and where I take it, you know, and I will never actually even completely say, oh, you're wrong. I will say I disagree with that point, or I found this, as opposed to, but this is the other portion, is there might be actually a conflagration of so much human absurdity, so much lack of give a damn, and wanton and gross negligence just for that bag, for greed. And that's one of your greater points, by the way. I got to give it to you, is that greed is one of the worst affectations of humanity, that once we get past that, past the manufactured and duplicitous scarcity that is caused by the freaking 1400. Crazy.
It's crazy that they would want to make things scarce so they can control the price, and then have, so there's enough for everybody's need, but not everybody's greed. And as soon as they bring scarcity into the issue, then there's people that go without. And when there's people that go without, causes a whole imbalance in the whole system. Now we start to get crime, theft, all these things that would never happen if people just had their basic needs met and people just abide by natural law. And as long as, you know, there was an abundance around, why would anyone want to have anything from anybody else when they could just, you know, have it? It could just be created into existence.
It's a very interesting point. You say natural law. I'd have to disagree with you there, because I'm from the Kurzweil school that sees the transhumanistic effort becoming the answer to our everyone sharing. Now, there's a lot of scary aspects of that, because as soon as you get into the transhuman idea, which is not quite or transhumanism, it is us becoming one with technology in one way or the other, or at least combining them to transform humanity. And that could be a lot of different things. Well, one of the greater aspects of this is combining AI and robotics to remove our need to work if we don't want to remove all of the very duplicitous things that make value out of reach or controllable, and also to control use of commodity, which we waste so much of, and which is a very human thing. And yeah, it is. It's the population. I'm sorry, I just read this. Yes, it is.
You know, you can read it. It's fine.
I'm sorry.
You can read it. This is your time. Your time to go whichever direction you want to go, brother.
Oh, thanks, man. No, it's one of those things. It's true. Only 1,400 people carrying the entirety, or the majority, which is 40%. That's more than most of the nations, or any one nation, has combined. The 1,400 people, and that's a cul-de-sac. Oh, it's not a cul-de-sac. It's as many people that live in the little town that I'm in right now. You know, yeah, I think that there is a lot of. Oh, this is one of the other things I was going to bring up. One thing that may shock you, I think may shock a lot of people that they haven't thought of, is that I don't even, and I really strongly I have a lot of evidence and reading to show that the 1,400 aren't even the ones that are controlling the manufactured scarcity. They have what they need. They don't give a damn. They're disconnected from it. Get me more by any means necessary. I don't want to know. You know what I mean? The real issue is the folks that don't have all that have a good portion of it, that feel that if they don't separate the two halves, or as I like to describe it, the ben on the obelisk, because the ben is separate from the obelisk. That pointy tip is not part of the obelisk. And that is, if people don't know, that is one of the oldest physical representations of power and power structure on the planet. The obelisk is a literal representation of power sitting on top of the funnel of humanity. It's one, and the ben isn't connected. It's its own, four-sided structure, with the bottom half looking down. So that bottom half is the half that's actually supporting the rest of the pyramid, right? It's a metaphor for power structure. And When I say that top 1400 probably doesn't give a damn nor anything about it, is so far removed they couldn't care. Oh, maybe they know. They don't give a damn. It's the folks underneath that. And when we remove the need for a middleman, when we remove the need for the even creating scarcity because of misuse or abuse or overuse, which is really the issue, because that middle management up there is really trying to make it so that there's enough, not on our behalf, but for their boss's behalf, right? And that's why I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of how this process is really kind of haphazard currently. And the logic of bettering ourselves altogether will be like a virus that takes over time. It's something where at first it's an innocuous flu that maybe gets a couple of us, and we're like, man, we can do this. We can look at the numbers. So this planet can support 20 billion people. But in fact, it's not so much using natural law as it is using our evolutionary law to outgrow all the behaviors we don't need and replace them with the behaviors we do need. That's the mindset. That's the practices. And right now, we have plenty of folks who are like, oh, you could never do that. You're always going to have somebody wanting more. You're always going to have somebody who has to be the boss. You always have to make money. Now, I understand that likely in our lifetimes, it's not very likely that we're going to have an AI transhuman revolution where we suddenly all can understand how much is needed, learn immediately, have robots do our bidding and work, and have enough for everybody. It's not likely in 20 years. But 200 years, that's not just kind of likely. That's inevitable based off of our technology and our capability and our growth as a planet. Add in the fact that we'll be off planet by then. I have a great hope for humanity in that sense. Star Trek becomes more and more real, although there's flaws with some of the logic in some things. The tech and many other things become more and more real, not simply because it's realistic, but because there's enough of us, Jesse, who see that stuff as promising, hopeful, and reason. And you and I are like a virus. The status quo would see us as deadly to them if we're allowed to take over, right? But it's you and I that infect this idea just a little bit and a little bit more, and a couple of generations down the line, it'll be more of a true belief and practice. Maybe someday it'll become a religion, and then by that point, it'll just be taken for granted that this is what we do for each other, and I think that we see that throughout humanity as a growth from pure feudalism and tribal controls to, which by the way, I don't want to take away. First Nations definitely had incredible, when you go back like 3,000 or 4,000 years, you look at the First Nations and there's stories of them having complete agreements and principled wars and things like that just go beyond what we could reason without, written record. But I think that we see a real growth, and maybe not in a bell curve, but in a slow increment, towards bettering ourselves as a planet, bettering ourselves as a species, slowly getting rid of the asshats that would undo, those folks that just want to be loved, but it takes the proofing over and over and over. It's going to be a couple more wars, going to be a couple more failures. But Kurzweil has it right. It'll be one morning we wake up after a long, slow slope, and we will all have everything we need without even recognizing or realizing that we did it.
And I think it's going to all happen a lot sooner than, you maybe think. You're saying maybe dead generations or generations down, but I think that this is truly a pivotal time in history. And I think that we've all been brought together at this time, not only to see through the illusion, but to actually, come together once again. Like you said, we're all connected. It's only you that can separate yourself from yourself. And once people start to realize that, we are all just one beautiful, spirit flowing through this thing, and we can actually work together, opposed to, having to work against and step over somebody's head to get ahead, when that's obviously the inverted way to, fixing this place. And I think that we're at that precusp, and I think that this is a pivotal time. And I've always seen how things could be here. Like I said, this has always been heaven on earth to me, and I've lived it that way, and I've had an amazing life. And I hear a lot of stories about people that, lives aren't, so amazing, or had to go through some of this crazy and trauma, that don't see this as a heaven. But I think that we can get there. And when you're talking about, not sure about the poisoning, or, you can't see that so much, it's a multifaceted attack, right? If there was just one thing that was doing it, people could easily find the root of the problem. So,
True.
like the fluoride would calcify the pineal gland, disconnect you from source, disconnect you from other people, disconnect you from your manifestation, your psychic abilities, your intuition. That's maybe what the fluoride does, right? Then you got the estrogen, which is in can lining, which is in everywhere. The estrogen is attack, again, more hormonal imbalances, getting people to, think of themselves away from, who they may be, because and then they introduce it through mental, the mental programming, the mental poisoning that they're doing, getting people to sway in thoughts from that balance. And then the big one, because we're electrical beings, we're being poisoned electrically through all the different towers and things. And and
well, that one, I've got something that would shock the heck out of you. So the stuff that people think would, or is affecting us, isn't as effective as they think. We've had 5G roaming around us for the past 60 years. Most people just don't realize that it's been around them, and in high velocity, higher than it is now, because it used to be the radio towers used to be able to like blast you and your neighborhood. And you just didn't realize you were getting hit with a lot more actual radio wave or microwave frequency than you are now. And people mistake 5G. It's too fast to actually affect you. The things that are affecting us, though, are really dastardly, because they are mostly innocuous, and they're in our home, and they are vibrating and sitting there whirring. And what ends up happening is that there is a subsonic wave from a lot of these devices, whether it be our refrigerator and our digital TV that's turned off, believe it or not, our computer. You can measure the background noise, which is a very real thing, driving people crazy. And in some cases, it is culminating in a disturbing 6.4 hertz wave, which arrests dream state. It causes nervous anxiety. It can make some people sick. Tesla found this out the hard way in Colorado Springs. He started testing his wireless electricity, and sure enough, people weren't getting sleep. They were reporting, when they were getting sleep, they were having crazy dreams, or they were just getting headaches for no apparent reason. Our neurological balance is less apt to be affected by those higher frequencies, whereas our meat is, though. Our meat fries and microwaves really slowly, really terribly, and we are very affected by radioactive waves. And I'm getting this wrong, and I know that what's his name, the atomic physicist, is going to be angry at me when I say this, but it's the microwaves that are faster frequency that do terrible things and give us cancer. Those are the things that hit the soft portions of our body, our organs, our brain, and really can, if you are close enough to them, like radio towers or underneath electronic wires. This has been a thing forever. You live underneath a bunch of electronic wires. You aren't getting just a consistent value of microwave exposure. You're getting a variance of low and high distortion values off of those lines. Forget about the main.
Yeah, electricity into our home, is some of the, you're talking about the TV and the, fridge and all that, but it comes to the electricity. We're sitting in a buzz tower. Imagine if you're in a building, a concrete building that's just full of these electricity. So all of that is part of this attack against us, and taking us away, putting the rubber on our shoes, disconnecting us from the earth so we're no longer grounding, telling people that the sun is scary, lathering up in toxic chemicals to protect yourself from the sun. There's again, this is
I would argue that that's just humans being stupid, because we always go to extremes between creative elements of solution. And I think that will balance itself out. We'll come up with better products that don't do all the stupid stuff. That's really, truly, I think that we're just egomaniacal on that stuff, and we come up with the worst things in the world. And then some people take advantage of them. Now, would you say this though, is that I want to go back to the electrical thing, because there's a very interesting thing about how a tiny Faraday cage around a transformer gets rid of all that stuff. And there's a little transformer or a little electronic vibrating, whether it's a capacitor or a resistor, capacitive device, in any or most of electronic devices nowadays. And all it takes is a tiny little cabin around it to stop that wider dissonant or distorted electrical frequency that's errant, that actually could be harmful to some. And some people are actually, by the way, sensitive to those things, strangely enough. Some people actually get sick by it directly. That said, is the answer. This is where I think there's something nefarious about this, because it's not really a cost deal. It's a little tiny piece of tin or a little tiny piece of copper that would go over these things, that would make it so that you have a barrier. You used to have this in mil-spec devices, but you don't anymore in common consumer devices. I do believe that this is just short-sighted. Now, that said, it being utilized by some who are aware of it, likely. In totality, though, I think this is a classic example of gross human negligence being so. Look at a great example: plastics. Nobody thought plastics would be as horrific as they are for humanity until 60 years after using them. And then suddenly we found out how terrible they were, and we doubled down. That's where you could call it nefarious, because the first 60 years, we didn't know they were really that terrible. We were trying to replace lead and all these other things. So this is where I'm saying is I really do believe some of this. I give humanity a little grace out, because look, man, mean average group of people at a concert has the IQ of about 65. You're going to have 10,000 people at a concert. You lower the IQ of everybody immediately. And that's just the way humanity works. It's like you can have a lot of geniuses in that group. The 10 idiots are going to drag everybody down, and they're the ones that are going to fall in the middle of everybody, and everybody collapses on top of it. But you know what I mean? I'm just being metaphorical here. But I really do think that that's a lot of it. And it's up to us, people like us, to recognize these problems, but also not to get caught up. And this is my take. Take it as you would. You're not to get caught up in the conspiracy. Be the conspiracist. Don't be the conspiracy theorist. You know what I'm saying? And if you can be the conspiracist on the alternate side to undo the great quote unquote conspiracy theories. But if you're undoing them, they're actually just a conspiracy at that point. So this is my whole thing is to avoid being the conspiracy theorist, and to try to really attack things that can be changed if we can, or influence. And I love, though, that you talk about this and bring this up, because this is where are we going if we aren't even talking about it, So even if we might have these, we don't see eye to eye on some of these things, we still understand these are things happening,
We have to converse about it, and we have to open dialogue. And the problem is right now with so many people is they don't want to hear anybody that doesn't align with them. And automatically, if they don't align with them, they're evil, they're the devil, they're programmed, they're Satanist, they're, controlled opposition, they're automatically dividing themselves from themselves. And I think a big part, and why I like this internet stuff, and we're using the technology, even though it was a DARPA, controlled thing to get to know who people were, what they aligned with. They wanted to know what people ate and all this kind of stuff. We're
Yeah.
actually using that technology to our benefit. And part of the stuff that's happening here, being able to converse with so many people around the earth, is it's opening up this dialogue
Mm.
and seeing that most people out there are good. Most
Yeah.
people out there have good hearts. Most people out there aren't trying to destroy. Most people are out there aren't, actual destructive forces that are doing it intentionally. There
Yeah.
are some of those out there, and people are, you'll know them by their fruits. People are
Yep.
exposing themselves to who and what they are. But most people that I've met through life have good hearts. It doesn't matter what race, color, religion, sexual orientation, doesn't matter where people's, heads are at. Most people's hearts are in a good place, even though they've been hardened, even though they've been traumatized, even though this world is a trauma-based system to keep people in that fear base where they can be controlled by fear. Most people still have a good heart, and that's what gives me so much hope and faith that we are here at this precipitous, this time, that we actually going to figure this out, so that way all the future generations will have a loving upbringing, opposed to a trauma-based upbringing where we are currently at right now.
Yeah, no, I see that. That is a modern manipulation for certain, at least in the Western world, that there's a component of our lives that holds back those that maybe otherwise would stand up and be like, oh, I can see something different in this. I can choose another way, because they're driven by fear of what they don't have, fear of what they might not achieve, fear of being driven out of society or their in group. There's a lot of this. And what you were talking about earlier as well about the differences, or the slight differences, driving people to say things like, oh, and this is, by the way, called false equivalency association, or false association equivalency, which is technically it's a psychological disorder, which is to say that somebody believes that if you like chocolate ice cream and they don't like chocolate ice cream and see it as evil, that means that you are evil for liking chocolate ice cream. And that false equivalency is not only an adolescent behavior that's supposed to be left behind, because you start to see that there's gray areas and more options than just a binary, but it also is a very dangerous effect on the human mind, because it makes people regress to in-group or cave behavior, which is they don't show me anything I don't know, don't show me anything I don't agree with, because otherwise I'm going to attack. And that is a very popular thing, one I think on the internet, specifically because so many of the groups here are very insular, lonely. I find a lot of lack of education in general. I find a lot of folks that don't really have, like, I guess, real life friends. And I say that I hate to say this, I don't want to sound crazy, but it's really, I don't think a lot of these people really go outside and have, like, see friends elsewhere, because I would say if they carried a lot of these perceptions of behaviors, bad behaviors, by any means, socially, culturally, civilly, if they were to behave the way they do in open, like, civil society, people won't be their friend. People will call them insufferable and tell them to their face. People will,
They will get smacked. They would get smacked in occasions, and people hide behind their computer screens. And, like, I'm all love, but I've had to smack people throughout my journey because of their behavior that was warranting that. And when that happens, that stuff doesn't happen with them again. When you correct someone's shitty behavior in person, they're more likely not to, continue on with that type of behavior. But, there's no consequences for most people on the internet. And then that's why they feel that they can, act the way they do, because they can hide behind, this digital experience.
Yes, I think that's a big deal. I think the keyboard warrior, the guy who, or the people who basically get screen bravery, that's a big deal. And it's given people a freedom that maybe they needed that. Maybe they feel, and I've given this credit by our credence to, is that maybe these people are so lonely or so downtrodden, they've never felt any powerful system, that when they do find something that connects them, that gives them some sense of importance or authority, that they can shout other people down or demand, and nothing is going to happen. There's no accountability for any of their stuff. So I think some of these people are finding that pretty freeing, and they don't even realize that they're playing a character of themselves, or that or maybe they do, but they're not being honest about it. Like they don't come face forward and be like, oh no, Aaron M. Sound on my show, that's a freaking character. I'm playing out a very extreme version of me. Like I can tell you my whole life story. It's all going to be true. But and by the way, this is the other thing is, and I'll add this in. The reason I've done this, and this relates to all this, is because you can't online, internet wise, have a life like mine. Nobody believes anything. So when you start talking about the things that I've done, seen, or lived, immediately they want you to prove your every moment of your life, which is I can actually do it in most cases, because I actually have tour books and pictures and videos, and like my entire life, literally down to the time of my childhood, from the moment I was born, was recorded in one way or another. This is fact, by the way. My birth screams were on the air on my dad's radio station about 15 minutes after I was born. So, I have the records of these things, but it's not even worth talking about with half these people. They're not going to believe you even when you show it, and they're going to look for something else because they want to find something wrong, because they don't have the comparative for themselves to say that they know any of these amazing things that we can do are real. That's the biggest issue. That's why they're warriors. They find one little thing they can do, they'll dismiss anything else simply because they don't have the experience to know otherwise. I don't blame them for being myopic. It's Plato's cave theory, or Berkeleyan, the unthinkable experiment. Is a person who lives in a room without windows and doors going to know anything about the outside world? Will they have a perception of it? Likely not. And we actually know this in practice. No, you don't. And you don't even build language skills. So that's another whole thing of this is. So I really do think that there is that sense of bravery is built out of cowardice.
Total cowardice. And then there's lots of repeaters who will just repeat things because it's popular to repeat, not because they know it, not because they know for sure. They're just repeating what other people say. And then there's those people that make false videos, false teachings, false things, and then you got 1,000 people that go out and repeat that and feel that that's the truth because they saw it on a video. So then there's a lot of people going out there bearing false witness over others when it's just they don't even know factual. They don't have any firsthand knowledge or experience that person did that or that took place, but they know it in their heart. That person is this because they seen it on a video somewhere. And then now the emergence, like you said, with AI, they can get anybody to look like they say anything or do anything. And then they feel that's the way the person acted or behaved when it wasn't even actually them. More of this false illusion, digital experience that is really poisoning people away from the truth.
Oh, man. Well, and let me tell you, confirmation bias. We're about to see an age of confirmation bias, unlike any in human history. That'll probably be one of the next great social wars. We're already seeing it, whether it be, these factions online, which are just tiny little subculture groups, which, you and I both have outside lives. And it's apparent because of just our language, our skill sets, our affability, our sense of reasoning. And we can talk to people that's like, oh, yeah, these people, they have lives. Some of these people really don't. This is their life. And they're getting caught up in nothing less than this is a manufactured environment where there are subsets, subcultures, sectors. We're in a corporate manufactured environment, literally right here. This is Orwell's nightmare, right here. Language is being changed for convenience. Words are being wiped out and replaced for simplification. INSOC, that's INSOC. Anybody remember 1984? I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where we are seeing a microcosm of what then will occur in the larger, in the meta later on, I do believe. And we are seeing it become easier and easier to become disenfranchised. And I think that without addressing and really staunchly kind of challenging everybody's perceptions, and I'm talking about the thinkers, the blamers, the folks that are just errant, misanthropic, finger pointers and waggers, who are literally just, in most cases, just waving a little tiny white flag that says virtue on it over and over, for their friends who want friends. I think that's a lot of it. I think folks are really, truly ready to deride and debase themselves so that they can feel like they have friends in a place that doesn't even exist, which is one of the greatest cons of modern humanity. Because now we are literally going to have to undo, and Lizardtree can tell you, I was pretty forward about it when I started, and I just kind of let it go about talking about it, but I tend to bring it up. My show is a deprogramming. I'm pretty face forward about it. I utilize the same things and technologies that MTV and everybody else has been using, and we use in big concerts, very simple things to allow for easier embedding of concepts. It's really, and more entertainment, by the way, and ADHD drop. There's a bunch of layers to it. The point being, though, is that if I'm doing it, imagine what else is going on out there. I'm doing it for fun. I'm doing it for art. I'm doing it because when I say deprogramming, I mean, I saw so many people affected, including people close to me, strangely enough, by these characters like Destiny or, many others who you may not realize, but there's a lot of people affected by these mindsets. And I felt like, why not at least, as you do, share in a way that you're not trying to hit a massive group of people. You're hitting a group of people that is seeking out what isn't there otherwise. And I think you also tend to hit more of the creators like I do, where I'm less interested in a massive group of people for a gathering, followers, quote unquote, or anything. It's nice to have viewers, but it's not as interesting as it is to influence people who make art, who make and create things, and who think things. And it's more important to influence somebody with 20,000 viewers as a person who has whatever 590 subs or whatever I have, me down here at the Boit. We're down here. We're all down here at the Boit. I don't know if you guys know what the Boit is, but that's the technical term for bottom of YouTube. Anybody without and it's a wide, vast gap, by the way. Anybody with less than 100 viewers at any time is, and they even consider like actually technically under 200, which is crazy, Boit. Because, by the way, most shows don't have thousands of viewers. Most shows have like 150 viewers that are streaming if they're big. If you start getting into the 200 and 300 zone, you're like, wow, man. Beyond that, it's not usual. It's really not usual, and you get this wide, like huge arc to the other big shows. The point that I'm trying to make, though, is that I don't think that we all have to be, and I don't particularly try to be some mass exposure creator personally, because I don't think it's as effective as it is maybe influencing or directly speaking to or giving little tidbits to other creators or artists. Just like I'm influenced, like all the things you see here, whether it's the, I give always credit to, these kind of things that you see with, there I am, the different views and stuff like that, and the different angles, the tech, even of all the swish around. I wish I had come up with a lot of these things. I am influenced by another artist I saw. I got some of these ideas from them, and many other things, including even the character that I have used to really put a spacesuit on my own self, by the way, this was what I'm going to say. For me, I personally, like with this influence of other creators, or hope to influence other creators rather than a mass audience, I also believe that a lot of this space is inundated with folks that aren't performers, which leads to a lack of real understanding and capability to deal with the mental stresses or complexity or any of the environment. So most people don't even understand that when I put on my spacesuit of Aaron M Sound, which by the way is my nomenclature for real life too, my professional term, but you know, I just have been, I know how to put on the character, so I've got a spacesuit on. So the real me is never exposed, really, the real me emotions, the real me values, those are never fully exposed. I can tell you the truth because, by the way, the greatest truths in the world, and let me just say this to challenge anybody's thought on this, have always come from our stories and fables. They never came from some guy standing on a pulpit. That's for damn sure. I mean, in any case, that's why I've kind of done this thing that is unusual. I don't want to be some talking head. I want people to enjoy and have a good time and watch some art and see this as a TV show, just like we always have. We're watching on the other side of the screen. Why did we suddenly think that because we can type alongside it and have a chat with people that we have in common, that we're enjoying the show, that suddenly the show should be affecting our social lives? Why is it? Why? Oh, because some folks are really hypnotized by this bullshit. They really are lonely. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and we've been doing all right for all of our different channels where it's been a slow and steady climb. We obviously, we've interviewed 70 doctors who speak out against medical tyranny. We've interviewed all kinds of people against, what is the norm. So we haven't been pushed in the algorithms, the exact opposite. We've been kind of hidden, but we usually get between 80 and 1,200 live viewers. And so we're reaching right now, we're at around 100. So on all of our different platforms. Cool. And so we have, we're live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Rumble. And then
holy mackerel.
So we're live on 6, and then we get uploaded to BitChute, Telegram, Odyssey, and then Dollar Vigilante TV. Jeff Berwick from the Dollar Vigilante TV. I'm not sure if you've ever seen his walk and talks, but they picked up our show as well. So they broadcast it to his private network. So we're slowly and surely chugging away, getting more and more people. And, so we really appreciate, I think we should be reaching hundreds of thousands or millions, but, slow and steady wins the race. And as long as, you provide, you build it and they will come. And it's, it was a long journey. And we had 4 YouTube channels deleted, probably over 20,000 YouTube subscribers probably gone in those 4 channels.
What was that about? It was just a bad
medical misinformation, having doctors telling their story about what happened to them in the emergency room or how they treated their patients. And they couldn't have that narrative because in order for them to have the Emergencies Act put forward, there couldn't be any alternative treatments to whatever this shit was. So anybody that was talking about alternative treatments, anybody was talking about the narrative, like when we had David Icke, I think he was interview number 15. He was our very first strike on interview number 15 when we.
Oh, you're kidding! So that. By the way, is it Icke or is it Icky?
I don't know. I think it's Icke, but I guess anybody can.
Oh, you talked with him, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, so I called him David Icke. So
if he didn't correct you, no, that's great information, because if he didn't correct you, that's good, because I've always heard it as like Icky, and I've also heard Ike too on occasion. So no, you spoke to him, he didn't correct you. We now know it's David Icke. Okay,
I've never heard Icky before, so that's David, the first time.
Yeah.
First I've actually heard about that, but again, like just before we did our first True Telethon, before we had created the Missing Link, my 13-year Facebook profile, my Facebook got deleted 1 week before I'm putting this whole everything, all of everything for 13 straight years. Every video, every picture, all the lives, everything that I did got deleted without the ability to even appeal it. There was said
So
appeal
was it just
here,
like a straight ahead strike and gone? It just like,
gone.
oh, by the way,
They
gone.
just deleted me 5 days before I was holding the first Truth Telethon in 2020, where we were hosting 26 truthers back to back to back about what was going on in the narrative. So it was like for 12, 13 straight hours we went, and I was hosting and emceeing it and put it on all together. And you know, I it just 5 days before deleted my whole channel, and they said,
What
"Oh, if
the
you want to
hell,
appeal
man?
it, click here." And it just looped and it just looped and it just looped. It didn't allow me to even appeal it. So I created a second
Yo.
channel, and then they blocked that when they asked me to put in my picture and ID and all that. So I put it in, and then they blocked that one. So I did my third Facebook one, and that's the one that I'm still running since October of 2020. I'm still on my
Yeah.
third profile, but I never got my first one back. We've had 4 YouTube channels deleted. We've had a lot of setbacks. A lot of times we sometimes get attacked. Like today, when we had our interview, we were interviewing earlier on today a lawyer who's been standing up to the corruption. She's been on the side of people that have had medical malpractice and stuff. So anyways, we're interviewing her, and then all of a sudden the whole system just went, oh, battery had to shut down, and my computer just turned off. Like stuff like little subtle things that they do to hinder progress, to deter us, you know, happens. They delete channels. Like we've had to experience this, but that's the reason why we've had to expand to so many different platforms, because just in case one of these ones have a problem with us, we're in so many other different places that, you know, at this point now we've built up all of the channels that I don't care if one of them goes down, because we're going to reach many, many thousands of people anyways. So,
Well, you protected
you know,
yourself by ridiculous amounts of indemnity. So well, good on you for that. And you know, I mean, more powerful. And also, you know, what a great example of folks and the younger folks, the kids there, dear. Yeah, I keep hearing this really strange, and it's just talking about art and performance and this is if you're a band or an actor or an artist or anything. Very, very, very few, 0.0001% of all the artists in the world make a thing or two, and then it becomes famous or big or even pays their bills. And I think that a lot of folks expect that success has the look of fame and fortune, when in actuality, if anybody's actually ever been an artist, a creator, a filmmaker, a musician, technician, getting to do the thing that you love, have a passion for, and make a living for it, or return the outcome, the return, return on your interest or investment. If you can return that into the thing that you're working on and have it be self-sustaining, that's success. That's real success, because it's so hard. It is so hard in so many ways, because you don't just get to do the thing that you want to do. You normally have to balance a bunch of different stuff, whether it's keeping a normal job while you work on the thing that you want to do, or your passion project, and this is something I don't think a lot of people take into consideration about these situations. And I think I've also heard this very strange, unrealistic expectation that there's this arc of success that happens, like you start and you just get better and better, and everybody comes to you immediately. You know, I met a man named Charles Bradley on the road, rest in peace. And what a wonderful dude. Myself and my friend Akil met him on the airplane originally, and we were going to the same festival. And then we ran into him at backstage at catering, and we had lunch with him. And then we ran into him walking around out in Melbourne one day. So we had dinner with him. And then we saw him back at the hotel. So we had breakfast with him. So we got to know, kind of, hang out with Charles Bradley. Well, Charles has this amazing story where Charles didn't get famous, and he never got rich, but he got famous. Or at least he got, well off, kind of. Like, he got paid. Charles didn't get famous until his late 50s. And that's when his first album really broke. He had like 10 albums. But it wasn't until we met him that he had just run into being in front of massive audiences of like 50,000 people. And his own shows were selling, like 2,000 to 5,000 tickets. And he was on main stage festivals with other big name acts, and not as a support, but like one of the headliners, or up there, normally in one of the bigger tents and stuff. And his first stories, he told us on the airplane some of his very earliest stories of how he was a plumber and he would sing in dive bars anywhere he could. And the point I'm trying to make here is that you just can't stop. If you love it, if it's what you want to do, you just can't stop. You just do it. You don't do it because there's money. You don't do it because there's people watching. You don't do it because you do it because you love what you're doing. I know I'm not going to joke to you. There could be lizard trees sitting there talking to me who thank goodness for, and nobody else. It's been like that before. When I first started, I still don't have a huge audience. I actually have a revolving audience. If anything, everybody comes to me, it seems, in between the other shows, which I kind of have built my show around. Scalp tickets to what, Just Frank? Which show?
The story you were just saying, I think.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I really don't. No, I don't. You know what? It's funny is he just totally stumped me too. I'm thinking about it. It just hit my head. I'm like, wow, I really don't know what any of those festivals ever cost. I am just, festivals when you're outside of that production, unless you're on the festival, you just don't know what it costs because it's just you show up and do the show, as opposed to your own shows where of course you know what the ticket costs. And if I found somebody scalping, they would not be scalping much further. And
what's your thoughts about the way the tickets are now? That as soon as tickets go for sale, then these companies buy them all out, and then they jack up all the prices. Like it to me is like it is horrific.
Yeah.
I don't think that's cool at all.
There's a couple great documentaries on this, but Live Nation owns Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster and Live Nation is the greatest production / venue management / they also do artist touring. They do so many things. They own rock and roll. AEG is another promoter. They own the promotion side of rock and roll, but aren't fully worldwide. Whereas Live Nation is everywhere. You have a couple other companies like PRG, which is production rental gear worldwide. The majority of the big gear that you see on concerts come from them. When it comes to audio, you've got a company called Claire, who is now gone massive worldwide. They've bought a number of the biggest companies, including a company called Eighth Day that used to be the big, outsider for a long time. Now there's only a couple major companies doing all this stuff, by the way, big conglomerations, and Live Nation has their hand in Claire's pocket. So even there with audio production or production in general, you still have Live Nation in there. Ticketmaster is owned by Live Nation. Same management company owns all of these companies, same group of people. And by the way, it goes back to the Eagles manager. Just so y'all know, that's literally, it all goes back to one dude. And the
Eagles manager was the guy who owns Live Nation.
Yeah. Okay. And the management company that basically has on its roster at any given time the top artists. Yeah, and for a while there, Scooter Braun was starting to pick up, but the Azov Corporation is monster. Little man with a big capability. Anyways,
Azov?
Yeah.
Well, why does that name sound familiar?
Well, because he's in everything, and his kids are in everything.
Oh, the Azov Brigade. I think I've heard about that. They come from Ukraine, the Azov Brigade. I'm wondering if it's the same connection.
I don't know about that, but maybe. He's an American kid, but he was the manager for the Eagles originally, and several other bands. Yeah. In any case, and actually, nice guy. But what they do is that they have ownership over all sides of this, like a kind of, it doesn't look like a monopoly, but it is clearly a monopoly. The ticket sales, they release a limited, or they have a limited number. They hold back for individual sales, and they separate some off for artist sales. So artists can direct sale. And this is because of Pearl Jam only, by the way. And what happens is the mass initial sales get purchased up by ticket buying programs that are bots that just basically, boom, the moment the gates are open, a million of them are bought, and they're bought on allotment process. So the people who have the most ticketing power get the most access, which is these bots. Well, it turns out that Ticketmaster has a number of subsidiary companies that they've purchased over time that are these secondary sales systems. Yes.
So
Like
they
the
have
real
first access to buy all of this, so they can actually make a bigger cut out of this by scalping.
Yes.
And like Lori said before, a scalper
Yes.
used to be a guy hanging out outside of the concert and scalping tickets or scalping, but now it's become corporate.
Yes. And it literally, it was because there was, for a period in time, there was the peer-to-peer resale of tickets, and those companies were getting a big foothold into the amount of tickets being sold, kind of bringing a balance to the force, let's say. And alongside the scalpers, Ticketmaster didn't like that. So they bought up a couple of these big peer-to-peer programs. And I can't remember the name of the big one, but it's this thing where it's essentially, it's all Ticketmaster under other names, who, is buying and reselling and taking all the tickets off market. And initially it was to try to keep the prices controlled, and it's never done that. And it's ridiculous when you're talking about.
It's done the exact opposite, just like the war on drugs created more drugs, just like the war on terror created more terror, just like, trying to create, fair ticket prices created exponential amounts of ticket prices. It seems like anytime they try to control something, it does the exact opposite of what they say that they want to do. And that's really bizarre, but I think that goes along with this inverted type of perverted world, this false matrix. It's an inversion of the truth.
Well, I don't know if it's so much of an inversion of a truth as the Subgenius. I don't know if I agree with that completely, because I think it's more opted to ruthless truth, because the universe is so damn ruthless about everything. Is that the more you bounce on the luck plane, and this is a Subgenius thing, by the way, the luck plane is like a trampoline. The more you bounce on it, the further it's going to expel you back. The more you lay in it, the more it holds you in. So the more we try to make things happen, the less they are to happen. Whereas when we go with the flow and create things within that, things just naturally occur. That's one way to look at it. I would say that, we really do have systems on both sides of incredulity and also of pie in the sky thought that ruin a lot of the most reasonable chances for best planned behavior. You know what I mean? It's like, we can come with a lot of great plans and structure, but as soon as you involve other humans, it's going to get effed. It's going to be open to planning by committee. It's going to get taken down by some ego middle manager. It never ceases to fail. It never ceases to fail. In fact, it is just one of the strange occurrences in the universe that perfection seems more to be imperfection, which you're right. It does seem upside down, and then I would pose the question philosophically. We could talk about this at length, but is it our bad perception to see the imperfection as a problem? Is it our inability to capitulate to the reality? Because I've argued with myself about this many a times to say, okay, it's perfect because it's broken as is. Is it me not accepting that it's broken as is? Or is it something that actually does need to be fixed? Do we know?
Well, I don't accept the theory that, you can't have good without the bad. You can't have light without the dark. You need to have, how can we appreciate the good stuff if we don't go through the turmoil? I don't subscribe to that theory. I think the yin and the yang was just supposed to be yin. Again, back to
Hmm.
that togetherness. I think that they created this false narrative yang that you have to have the opposite in order to justify shitty behavior. And I don't think that, I think that goes against our natural, harmonious rhythm to life. I think things are supposed to be in balance, things are supposed to be in order, but because they've convinced the masses that you need to have this darkness in order to appreciate the light, that's why we're so off balance. And that's my own, the way of looking at things. This is the way I see things, but I'm not saying everybody has to look like that or believe that, but that's just the way I see this is life. And I think we are out of balance right now. And I think that that's why we're all here, is to bring things back into balance, where we're back into balance with each other, back into balance with nature, back into balance with animals, back into balance where we start taking care of things opposed to exploiting things.
And I that's a very interesting point, by the way. And I do agree with a good portion of this. Is that Koyaanisqatsi, we are life out of balance, you know, or Pewanikwatsi, which is life off kilter, or humanity off kilter is what it is. I think that is true. And when it comes to humans, when it comes to we can be better. We can be beautiful. We can be loving. We can be all these things and even more, because we are boundless and morphable and malleable. The universe, I don't agree with you there, because I don't see anywhere where we don't have a yin and yang of like dark and light, smashing atoms and terrible cold and warmth and some tiny speck of hope and light. So these are things where I can't agree with you there. But humans aren't exactly just a reflection of the universe. We are a reflection of our own making as well, because clearly we are we become as we see. We have definitely changed over our own process of what we know of ourselves. So not to get too far away from what you were talking about, but I do think that humans definitely do have the ability to wipe away the yang, or play a more non-polarized or binary. I would even challenge that we have a wider spectrum of range than we could ever give ourselves courage to admit to. And we've seen it amongst the Eastern philosophers or the Tibetan monks who have, quote unquote, transcended in a beam of light, left their mortal coil and literally left in a tiny rainbow. There's even some pictures of that stuff that I've seen that, whether it could be verified that that's true. Coincidentally, it's kind of impossible to say that it wouldn't be that, but it's also, it could be a trick of light or all kinds of other things. But the truth is that many people saw these things, have seen these things. It's been recorded repeatedly that this can happen. So clearly we can transcend. Clearly we can become more than what we perceive ourselves to be. And I do agree that there is a certain amount of con artistry amongst humanity, in the side of, it's easier to sell a Cadillac to somebody who believes they need one than it is to get them to believe that they don't need a Cadillac. They can do fine with a Honda.
It's easier to trick someone than to convince them that they've been fooled.
100%. Yes.
And that's sad. That's a sad place, that there is such a spell, that's put over people, a wool over people's eyes, that they trust their, it's in the captors. They, this Stockholm syndrome is real. Like, people will defend the slave masters to the death. The ones that keep them enslaved, they'll defend them at all costs. And like, look what happened to Libya, right? I'm not sure if you're aware of Muammar Gaddafi and Libya
absolutely.
and stuff. And so
that's
he wanted to free the American continent. He wanted to bring people back to the gold standard. He wanted to free America from the slave masters, the tyranny, the banker gangsters, Khazarian mafia, whatever you want to call them, the shot callers, the string pullers. He wanted to free Africa, and
Mm.
they murdered him because of it. And now that was one of the most beautiful countries on earth, was Libya. They had free education. They had if you couldn't find the education in Libya and you wanted to go to America to get educated, Libya government would pay for your full education, tuition, everywhere. Like, it was such a beautiful state,
That
right?
being true,
And
wait,
now,
I got to stop you here, though,
but
Jesse.
just hang on, just
Yeah.
hang on.
Yeah,
And
sorry.
now there's actual real life slavery in Libya after what the Americans done. There's people selling men and women for money, like, I'm buying a slave. This was never the case before what they did to Gaddafi. It was one of the most beautiful places on earth. He was a
Well,
dictator. He treated his people, but he treated his people well, right? And a
well,
lot
hold
of
on a
the
second.
lot of the propaganda that people, especially
There's
in the West American, thinks about Gaddafi were lies.
so okay. There is a sense of ability to deal with other nation states, even if they are oppressive. And diplomacy is what that is called. And when you deal with diplomacy as Gaddafi did historically, where it doesn't really matter that much that good things were being done in his own place, in his mindset, or for his people, if he was doing as much bad as he was good, which that's not rhetoric. That's not made up. He committed atrocities just as much as he tried to do good things.
Most
That
of it
said,
was made up. Most of it was made
no,
up
no,
to
no, no, no. This
justify
is
what
I
they
mean,
did.
there's
What they
literally
did to Libya.
there's direct association between the Lockerbie bombing and him. Which is
Yeah,
why we
but
bombed his
that's
house.
what the CIA did that. Then to blame him,
There's
again, there's lots of false flags that
Jesse,
happen. The stuff in
Jesse,
Syria,
there's more
the gas
evidence
and
to show that there's more evidence that shows that he was directly involved with it than there is CIA directed that. Now, I will totally back if you want to talk about South America and their involvement there. But when you're talking about him in particular, that is one of the world's great, like, Lex Luthors, to be real. That dude, out of all of them, was a king in his own world because of the way that he controlled things. Now, there's many facets of him that are interesting, intelligent, and positive. I'll give him that, because you are saying what you're saying is correct. He did set up those programs, and he did it really to put the finger in the face of the U.S. But he also committed atrocities, and that's no different than what the U.S. has done over time. And one doesn't make any other better. I would actually say that does no one service to point out either side, other than to say that we shouldn't be doing, and neither should he. Nobody should be in that situation, because I'll look at it. But if I'm not mistaken, he actually trafficked humans from the get-go.
I've never, out of all the research that I've done, the real stuff, talking people within, again, a lot of what people know, a lot of the propaganda, what people think was happening in Libya, it's all indoctrination in order to justify American
history.
tyranny.
Wait, Jesse, you are negating historians in a way that I can't allow you to do that, because multiple people, including on the ground and people from their perception on either side, there's lots of credible history. And also multiple governments. And also, I look at these things from all sorts of different values. And I'll go back and look at this, because it's been a while since I've looked at Libya, but it was a thing for a minute with me, especially looking at the Middle East to understand these people. And Muammar Gaddafi, being the most untouched out of all of the quote unquote kings of the district, really, does stand out. And he challenged us in so many ways, and we couldn't get him. He was kind of like a Fidel Castro in a lot of ways. But the point I'm trying to make is that to discount what is filmed, to discount what has actually been seen, and in most cases, especially military organizations, public news, maybe if you're reading a Reuters blurb, or if you're believing something in a TikTok scroll, that's one thing, man. But when you're talking about reports on the ground and comparing them, or just looking at military reports, these things do not have a reason to lie. They might have a reason in
100%
them.
they have a reason to lie.
No, because
In
no,
order
you're
to
missing. Wait, let me
further
finish. Let me
in order
finish.
to further
You're
their
talking about
propaganda.
propaganda as a promotion device. You're not talking about reporting, because what military reporting and on the ground reporting for proper just usage is done so that people can learn what's happening. And these things aren't just thrown away. They're chronicled throughout human history. It's why history is a real thing. It's why a lot of this talk of like missing history and stuff can be just disproved over and over again, because there's too many points of view that talk about things in the same time period, that keep the same chronicalization, that take the same. I mean, this is where I can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I can agree with the fact that there is no question that the U.S. has done untold amounts of subversive efforts to undo other countries, and that there's plenty of that. But I'm also never going to let you say that we're not a free country, because we're super free. We wouldn't be able to have this conversation. I don't know if you've ever been to China or any of these countries that like I heard another streamer one night saying we should just go to Russia. Well, I fucking lived in Russia for a while, and what folks would think, oh, it's just free. No. You and I would not be having this discussion this way. That's for damn sure. In fact, in the middle of this discussion, it would just be very quickly like one of us would be like, well, it'll be off camera real quick. And I know this for a base fact, really, truly, because I have a friend who I don't get to speak to very often. And he's a musician. He's a clown, actually, and a famous musician over there in Moscow. And he's just a wonderful dude. I've known him since I lived in Moscow doing I did the play Hair, by the way, over in Moscow, 1999. I'd never been done there, which talk about a subversive event to do in the middle of Moscow. A show about hippies in the 60s while we were fighting them. It made no sense why we did it, but we did it. Anyways, point being is that people, I think, really over accentuate the or maybe don't understand what it's like to be in a totalitarian system, or in a place like where a Maharaja rules, or in Dubai even. If you've never been there and you've never seen the religious police roll by, who have swords on their side, who can take your hand off right there without any jurisdiction or any reason, just like, oh, we're told you stole, we believe you stole, we're the judge and jury, boom, this kind of stuff. Much less
Well, even more in Dubai, even more. We interviewed Mona. She's a Muslim
slavery.
lady that's become a friend of ours.
Yeah.
She actually was in Dubai, and when she was working for the airline industry, when she was in France, she smoked some weed with someone in France. When she came back to Dubai, and somehow someone got wind of whatever, they wanted a blood test. They wanted a blood test of her. Then it actually had some cannabis in her blood, and they had like put her in jail because of that. So I get that, but we just interviewed Alpha Warrior, Alfredo Luna. He's got a show. So he's an ex-Marine who was in Iraq. He's decorated Marine. Never had anything against him while in the military. He went to California and became a gang police officer, decorated police officer. He even did undercover. I don't know if it was LA. I think it might have been a smaller county, but I don't know. Okay. He didn't quite say LA, but somewhere there in California. And he was just on our show like a week or two ago, and he made a tweet about the government tyranny. And because of the stuff that happened in January 6th, the FBI kicked in his door and terrorized his family. He was never at January 6th. He was never there. They came, and he's been battling them since January 6th. He still got court. They were trying to give him all these plea deals. He got targeted by the American government.
Was he in one of those Discord servers that they
collected? No, was he wasn't in. He made it because of a tweet he made on Twitter. And that's why they targeted him for what happened. So we're talking about this is
okay.
Not,
so hold on a second.
We're talking about a decorated Marine who was.
I understand this, but I have to question some of the validity, because this is the kind of stuff, the FBI breaking in the door of a Marine would be front page news across the nation, and because frankly, people may not realize it, but the only reason we believe so many things are happening is because we can see all the things that are happening, whereas we used to not be able to see it all. And if it's anywhere in California, especially, you would never get away with that. People have some crazy idea that California is some kind of like, liberal bastion when the majority of the center of the state is very conservative, much less the fact that something like that would have caught wildfire out here. It would have pissed everybody off because first off, it's a big deal out here. You don't fuck with our veterans. That is one thing that all Americans really just are behind. You don't fuck with our veterans. Doesn't matter if you're the FBI. Breonna Taylor, great example. She was an off-duty ambulance person. So I would have to look at that. I don't know if I can give it full credence unless I really read what happened because there's something missing from that story.
Look, he's
There's
Alpha
something
Warrior.
missing.
Shares this.
Yeah.
He was on. We interviewed him. We're talking about a decorated Marine, a decorated police officer.
Hey, man,
that got targeted by the American government because of their January 6th narrative.
Jesse, don't forget, there was not less than a decade ago. There was an incredibly decorated dude who had worked for the federal government for several different services and was clearly some high secret official who, after the fact, it was like it turned out that he had been credentialed to the highest level of top secret and yada yada. And turned out after the fact that the dude had one of the largest illegal stockpiles of weaponry in the entire US. He had literally 1/4 of a nuclear device worth of explosives in his home, but he was a credentialed military guy that everybody loved and nobody knew any better. There's plenty of examples of these things. And I only say this is just that it sounds odd. We in the US, we really don't live in a police state like that. Like the FBI doesn't just kick down your door with no evidence because they get handled. I mean, they get on the news for that kind of shit. Now, if there was nothing, we'll be able to find that out pretty easily. But I believe that there's something missing from that story that maybe we just don't know.
So it's gone to
there had to be
court.
something that trigger,
So it's like I said, he's taking it. They're trying to give him a deal. They're trying to expunge his record if he takes the deal. They just want him to plead guilty, but he says he's done nothing wrong. So he's going all the way. They're going after an illegal firearm or something that he had in his house when they raided his house illegally. So they obviously don't want to. They don't want firearm. But it wasn't an illegal. It was a firearm that he got from when he was in his service on the police force. So he actually did nothing wrong. It wasn't something he had to turn in. But this is what he's being charged with. I don't know what else other charges were there, but that's what he's finally going to court. That they want him to plead guilty for this firearm, and he's going all the way. He says he's facing 18 years in jail. And he will not plead guilty. They want to give him a deal that he will just do no time. They'll completely expunge his record. His name is Alfredo Luna, and from Alpha Warrior.
Let me look it up because maybe I can figure it up. Because there's got to be something. Because the only reason that anybody would break down your door for a weapon in the U.S. like that.
That's not what they went for. It was for a tweet. They wanted.
That's even less likely.
They had him part of this whole January 6th narrative because they were saying
what's his name again?
It was Alfredo Luna.
So the other thing is that there's clearly a portion of the story missing. There would have to be some assertion of connection between somebody making a plan or something for them to actually come, or there could be a mistake. That's the thing. The FBI does make fucking super mistakes. And when they do, they make them real bad. That I believe. Hold on a second. Oh, NBC did cover this. Hold on a second. Arrested Inauguration Day. Daniel Rodriguez stemming from a prior search of his home that allegedly. Well, why did they search his home? Hold on a second. Domestic extremism probe.
Because of a tweet. They said it was because he said it's because of a tweet he made.
Hold on. Before you tell me, let me just read it.
As well as anything that you're getting off of mainstream media is not really the truth.
Okay, stop right there because quote unquote mainstream media, you cannot be nihilistic about information when they're just as nerdy as we are. The people who promote the news, and this is somebody who's worked for a Reuters reporter repeatedly, they do heavy diligence and their whole entire life is based off of getting the report right. And the majority of stuff is true. Now, does propaganda exist? Yes. But you can read through the bias to get facts and then counter it with verifying the information in multiple sources. They aren't all written by the same person, especially in that case. So when you find a number of reporters that have the same point of view, or at least the same cogent information, you can verify it. This isn't, the universe isn't some imaginary thing. So let me just look at I'm looking first at the local news, which tends to be pretty honest. And this is local from Palm Springs. So stemming from a prior search of his home. So this is where my first question comes in. Prior search. What was the prior search? Unregistered assault rifle. Okay, so that's some weak sauce. Luna, why would they be searching for a assault rifle without Luna arraigned with larceny, remains out of custody? Court papers. Former Cathedral police officer was an adherent to the QAnon conspiracy theory and a right-wing militia group involved in storming. Okay, so it's saying that he was involved in the group, but what's the cohesion to that? Let's see if there is any. John Candias, a Rialto Police Department detective, member of the task force, wrote a declaration in support of the arrest warrant that a search of the defendant's home yielded an unregistered. So it wasn't FBI; it was just local police. Smith and Wesson. That's very weird, though. This is very weird. Investigators stated that when they questioned Luna about the gun, he said he bought it. Okay, that doesn't even fucking matter because he can own a gun. Okay, it was unregistered. That's not a big deal. You can get that fixed, but I'm not seeing the connection. Half dozen other guns they seized. Okay, but why did they get why in the first place? Was there connection? Okay, a separate arrest warrant alleges that Luna had been posting messages and images of his discontent for the government officials and advocates and others to carry out violence. Not too much you can do. There's not too much you can't do in freedom of speech, but you can't threaten violence on you can't threaten violence on like officials. So if he advocated others to carry out violence, which is stochastic violence, it's a misdemeanor essentially. And if they find, okay, so this is the problem that is that's problematic for me. There's a quote here from the arrest warrant. This is behavior is consistent with pre-incident indicators of extreme violence. That would be an area where the FBI would come to your home and just question you. Why the fuck did the local police go in? Now, this is interesting. This is super interesting because there's some definite questions here. Yeah. Okay, so there's some questions. I understand why maybe there was interest in him, but going to collect his weapon on a warrant is very weird.
Decorated Marine. We're talking about a decorated Marine, decorated police officer.
There was a bunch of Marines and military that went in and tried to attack our constitutional vote.
But that's not what happened there. That's not
on January 6th. We all watched it live on TV. That's exactly what happened.
No, it's not. So you're seeing things in different, eyes, right? Like, so I even interviewed Jacob Chance. I even interviewed Jacob Chansley, which was the Viking shaman. Like, so I've done extensive research.
The guy who did prison. He went to prison because he was wrong. Jesse, this is the thing is you are talking to someone who is a staunch and by the way, one of my relatives is a high-ranking government official over there in China right now, with the embassy. I have plenty of family in government. I've been to the White House. I've been invited more than once, personally. I've seen the inner workings. You are talking about something that maybe you don't understand. What they did on January 6th was insurrection, no question, if, ands, or buts. It's not a question amongst the general public. The only people it's a question on through are people who believe a Russian FSB propaganda campaign that is nothing less than subversion of our interests. And no, 1,700 or whatever it was, 1,600 people invading to stop the final count of the vote is an insurrection and an attempt to disrupt the vote itself. There will never be a time that isn't the case. There was violence. We saw it on TV live. I watched it live. I have it recorded, for God's sakes. So you can say what you want.
I've spoken to many people that were actually there, and
it doesn't matter. They're going to lie about why they were there, Jesse.
What part?
They're not going to see it. They're going to see it as they were revolutionaries, and they weren't.
Everybody go there peacefully speaks to you an insurrection.
We are the people. It wasn't peaceful. It was a violent clash that we watched live.
Trump wasn't part of that.
He instigated the damn thing. I
No, he
watched that
didn't
too and have that
instigate it, but
recorded.
he didn't. How did
Jesse,
he?
you are a
He
Canadian
said to go
talking
over there,
about this. This is not a
but
conversation we
again,
can see eye to eye on.
but
Okay,
again, no,
Jesse, Jesse, you
you're
have
seeing
no
it
say
under
in
your
this, really,
blinders
truly.
on. You want to
Other than to
believe
say
that he's a
that you
bad
might
guy.
believe something that is not true. I don't have
That's
blinders on,
exactly
Jesse.
what
I
you're
was
believing.
watching the
Of
whole
course,
fucking thing.
of
Jesse,
course
not
you
only
are.
that, but you are
From the
actually
narrative
talking
that you're
about something.
talking about,
Jesse, the majority of
the
Americans, those of
narrative
us
you're
who did
talking
vote, don't
about,
agree with you. And that's the other thing is
that
there was a tiny
doesn't
amount of
matter
people
what you agree or
insurrecting.
not agree.
Oh
Trump
man, we can't see eye to eye. We're gonna have to agree to
but
disagree on this, Jesse, because
but
this is
Trump
a big
tried to
deal.
get the
You are
National
literally
Guard,
pushing
but
Russian propaganda by repeating
Trump,
this.
no, I'm
And I
not.
can't.
Trump
Yes,
tried,
you
but
are,
Trump
because
tried.
that's where it
No,
comes
it's
from, dude.
no,
It's
it's no,
FSB
no,
fucking
it's not.
talking points.
It comes from the
They are.
Democratic propaganda, just like the
No,
Hillary
man.
Russian
There is
collusion. You
we
don't think
are a
that was the
nation
case?
of people who make our nation work.
You
And you
are
might not believe
you're
that.
wrong.
You might not believe that, but
You
you're
got
not
the
part of it, and
spell
you've
put
never
on.
taken
You
part in
got
it.
the
So you
spell
don't
put under.
know. And you
No,
have an
I know.
outside
I've
point
been
of view that
researching
is
this for
actually
30
looking in,
years.
Jesse.
I know a lot more than most
Jesse,
people on this earth.
okay, so listen to me very carefully. Have you ever taken part in the US government directly? You ever had
No,
any clearances? You ever taken part in any of it? You ever
no,
even taken part in local voting in the
no,
US?
no.
Okay, so no, you don't have any actual experience. You have an outside point of view of uninformed, unexperienced intent. I
Not
understand you might have your point of
uninformed.
view. Wait, it is
I've been
completely
researching this.
uninformed because it
No,
makes no
it's
sense with
absolute.
how it actually
It's
works, Jesse.
no, but
This is once again,
you're
I want
wrong.
us to leave this because
You
we're
were
not
spinning
going
the
to agree
Democratic
on this
narrative.
subject, sir. No,
Yeah,
what I have
then you
is the attitude of somebody who's taken part in their own government, who's actually
doesn't matter.
seeing the other people working in it and knowing that the other people are just as well-meaning as any of us in the majority of the cases. And in the case of January 6th, it was clear that a small, very angry group of people that wanted to try to take control of our government went and tried to do that. And that's why it's called insurrection. And that's why it was called an insurrection and is called an insurrection and will historically forever be an insurrection, except for the folks that believe in QAnon, which is an FSB cover. And if you want to believe that, you can, man. But I mean, this is the truth.
Okay, but is this the truth or not? That Trump tried to get the nut. But you're not even listening. You automatically, when I just tried to say something, you weren't even listening and you were talking. So how can we continue on a conversation when you won't even hear me? Your blinders are so put on that I tried to say something and you automatically started to talk without even listening to me. So how can we actually have an honest conversation when you can't even hear what I'm saying?
Jesse, you are literally starting the conversation with a dishonest point of view to say that wasn't an insurrection. And this is the thing is it was and is considered amongst us an insurrection. You may not like that, but that is historical fact now. And the QAnon folks that actually, you may have spoken with them, but this is the thing. Dude went to prison. So he's wrong by the facet of the public. We aren't the system of authoritarian government. We aren't Canada. We don't have some old school rule. We are literally a people driving ourselves. The only reason we have problems in our government is because not enough people take part and too many people are disenfranchised from what is our control system. And that's one of the sad things of the misunderstandings of all of this is those folks and also let me just point out the majority of those people, both imprisoned and who left a trail of evidence, massive trail of evidence of the planning of such things across 26 Discord servers and thousands upon thousands of Facebook pages. I mean, the evidence is ridiculous, man, that there was intent, cause, and actually the buildup and payoff that comes from a subversive program from the FSB and China. And right now, by the way, if you want to really focus on something very concerning in the US, we actually have a problem where, and this is true because I've been reading this in the DOD and in the Pentagon reports and in the concerns over the border. And I've never really been concerned about the border ever before because I believe in a free flow. That's how my family got here, is a free flow of transfer of people. But we do have a problem right now because literally Chinese citizens, men mostly, are slowly coming into our country across the southern border. And it is believed that they may be actually infiltrating to subvert our infrastructure. And that would be level 3 of a 5-tier plan to basically attack the U.S. and get the U.S. to dilapidate of its own accord, specifically subverting in an urban warfare propaganda program to disenfranchise people with disinformation. So I won't take part, and I won't let it be done in front of me, because I'm too informed on the subject, and I'm too much of a real believer in our system, because our system has checks and balances if it is taken part in. It's unusual, unlike most other countries or systems. And for those that don't want to believe in it, that's fine. They don't take part anyways. You always find out these people don't take part, don't even know how the civil services work. So, you know, I mean, what can I say, man? I just know for a fact that between the anecdotal, the actual systemic, and the practices, and being involved. And by the way, look, it's not perfect. I'm in a battle with LA County over building my house, and have been for 5 years. So it's not perfect, but it ain't Russia. It ain't China. It's not even Canada, man. I mean, that's the other thing, is you guys can have your rights taken away by some person in your parliament that isn't even a member of your government. I don't know. Do you know that? Do you know about that? Like, they can just take your rights away. That's not how it works here. It never has been, never will be. It may have moments where we do have authoritarian groups, small groups. We also have white nationalist Christians who believe that they are the rightful owners of the nation. And that's about 22% of the actual Republican Party. That's even weirder, is that they are such a loud voice that it makes people believe that that's what the nation is about. And we're not. We're just not. And one of the things that should be telling about that is the fact that there is such a back and forth drive in all of this. But I will tell you this, is it will always go down in history as an insurrection, because next to the stomping of the White House in, I think it's 1812, there has never been another period outside of the Civil War where that many people, in fact, there was less people in the stomping of the White House. There was only about 500-600 people stomping the White House. So I just have to disagree with you there, man. And I could pull up hours and hours of video and tons of evidence, and there is just general evidence also in the trials and how many people have been convicted. We don't have kangaroo courts over here. You know, most of these are trials by, you know, with juries of their peers. You know, so we will never see eye to eye. I'm sorry. If anything, I'm too much of an American for that. I just am. You know, so.
Is there anything that you wanted to share before we wrap this up?
Just that I appreciate that we can have these discussions and even disagreements. And still, I know you and I will get along because you're a good dude and you have a love in your heart, and that we're able to have these things and not see eye to eye. You know, I mean, like that's I think the key important thing is that we have this space to be open, creative, loving, sharing, you know, and to transmit the information. That otherwise wouldn't get transmitted, but to not get bogged down by thinking that everything is evil, because the majority of things are good.
Majority of people are good, but the system is corrupted and filthy, and is, you know, the beast system that the Bible warns people about. But again,
we could have a whole other discussion on that one.
Well, thank you for coming here. It's been 3 hours, so for sharing your thoughts, your insights, and people just to get to know you better and what, you know, you align with and what you believe. It's always important that people get all kinds of different perspectives and views, and that's what the Missing Link is about, is, you know, just hearing different, you know, thoughts and views and perspectives. We're not telling anybody here what to think. We're just giving people the enough ability from every different walk of life, you know, and what their experience, what they align with, what their stories are, you know, to get them, you know, feeling what they're in alignment with, so you can make your own decisions on, or where your own choices, your own thoughts on how things are and how things run. So thanks again. May the source be with you, protection around you throughout this journey. We've got 2 missing links tomorrow. We've got Gilbert Vachon, who's going to be talking about, you know, the impact that this last 4 years have had on his life with the injections and all that kind of stuff. You know, so I think it'll be a heart-wrenching story. And then we've got Will Keller, another, you know, content creator. He's actually he does the production for Mark Passio. He does like the video production and all that kind of stuff. So he's going to be tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then we got Dwayne Hayes coming back for maybe the 6th or 7th time. He's a forensic historian, and he goes through exactly how the corruption throughout the political system in mostly the Western, United States has happened, how it became, the Walter Brandows and all the Supreme Court justices who put their influence to make things the way they are. So love y'all. Thanks for all your likes, comments, hearts, shares, and stars. We appreciate all of your love and support. May the source be with y'all, and we'll see you next time we see you back here on The Missing Link. Thanks a lot, Aaron.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me, and the audience.